This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Morning, it's 3 minutes after 10, and well, this hasn't really happened to me before. Yesterday's show was unprecedented in many ways, and you've heard me say many times I'm not sure what I think about something, or I need you to explain things to me, and it's always been true. Some mornings, if I'm completely honest with you, it may have been a consequence of laziness rather than genuine confusion, but it's more fun when you're ringing to school me than it is when you're tuning in to be schooled. So yesterday I came on air at 10 o'clock, about an hour after events in Jerusalem were due to have begun, and the information we had was that Donald Trump would start talking at about 9 a.m. I give or take a brief introduction or a little bit of ceremony and possibly even some pomp. And by 10 a.m. when I came on air, things were already an hour late. Was it about 11:30 by the time events at no? I'm still confused. You can tell from the fact that I just garbled incomprehensibly. It started at 10:56, at which point the speaker, the speaker spoke first, didn't he? At about 10:27, and then Netanyahu started speaking at about 11:25. It actually started at no, that can't be right. 10:56 was the start, but the speaker started speaking at 10:27. Even the numbers that are being put in front of me don't make any arithmetical sense, do they? But Trump then started speaking and carried on speaking until long after my show had ended. So for the first time ever, I found myself opening a show with a speech that was an hour late and ending it before the speech had finished. I've never known anything like it. And I sat here, having opened yesterday's show with the intention of having a phone-in about whether or not... we did do an hour on that, didn't we? God, my memory's like Swiss cheese. On whether or not there was any better available option than the one that Donald Trump had kind of imposed upon or compelled Benjamin Netanyahu to sign up for, while Arab countries were bringing similar pressure to bear upon Hamas, albeit that they had signed up for something more or less identical a year ago. The feeling I had during that sort of extraordinarily triumphalist session in Parliament, underpinned, of course, by the fact that the Speaker had instructed everybody present that even a single squeak of dissent or disagreement would result in removal from the chamber. That, I think, was the first point at which I found myself thinking, pardon? I mean, the idea that everybody in the Knesset, let alone Israel, is united behind Benjamin Netanyahu is completely at odds with the observable facts. But that was the first inkling you got that we were watching something very carefully choreographed, even though it had been set up at quite short notice. And then we embarked upon this extraordinary round of congratulation and triumphalism without a single mention. And I'm always a little bit impatient with people who say to me, why are you talking about this and not talking about that? Because you can't talk about all of the things all of the time. And, we have to make priorities. We have to take priorities. But it was notable that the mention of the casualties and deaths in Gaza was notable entirely by its absence. And I understand up to a point why that would be. But if you were celebrating a peace, you would arguably acknowledge the existence of two sides in the suffering and indeed two sides in the settlement. But it definitely wasn't that kind of event. It was an extraordinary round of, to my mind, and this is where you may want to correct me, attempts to rewrite history. And it began to look, and a couple of you suggested this to me, and I am going to conclude this introduction, although I don't think it'll be as long as Donald Trump's monologue yesterday, by asking you what you think was going on, what you think happened. And there's two parts to it. There's the Trump speech, and then there's the Knesset activity, including the speeches by Benjamin Netanyahu and the leader of the opposition, to whom it fell to embark upon the perhaps most full-throated attempt at genocide denial. And then there's Trump's speech, which was not at all. The more you listened to it, and this is why I come to you today still with a sense of, not bafflement at least, but without a very neat explanation of what happened, and that could well prove to be because there isn't one. Trump said a lot of things that would not have gone down well in that room. Notably the bit where he told Benjamin Netanyahu that he couldn't just carry on doing kill, 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 which is something of a refutation of everything that had gone before in the Israeli attempts to typify what had actually happened in Gaza. Everybody honest knows it was kill, kill, kill. But Donald Trump actually said it in the Knesset. And then you have one of those extraordinary pendulum swinging moments where you go, what did he just do? So he sort of absorbed the extraordinary sycophancy. But I think underneath the sycophancy was an election campaign launch. And this is the bit that I struggled with. I didn't read it out yesterday. I wanted to check the thinking behind it. A couple of people who have histories of sending me very helpful stuff, one from Israel, one not, both made the point that this was actually an early campaign launch for Netanyahu's latest attempt at self-preservation. I mean, that element of it is, it's domestic politics. It's international politics because of what's been going on in the last few years, and of course because of what the ramifications of anything that happens in the Middle East have for the rest of us. But the reason I didn't read it out yesterday is because I just wanted to be sure of the thinking behind it. But looking at it today, thinking back to what we witnessed yesterday, the idea that it was actually an election campaign launch, the idea in Israel that he might go to the country soon has gathered pace. He's not required to until next year. Likelihood of him being imprisoned by then is growing by the day. The longer the peace sustains, the more that likelihood grows because of the corruption charges that he faces. Corruption charges that Trump then called upon the president of Israel to drop because, hey, who cares about bribery allegations in Trump land? In fact, he expressed a degree of derision that the corruption allegations appeared to involve cigars and champagne. I mean, come on. Donald Trump's just appointed someone who was given a bag with $50,000 in it and was recorded by the FBI admitting so. He hasn't lost his job. So there's another example of the thing about you can't talk about all of the things all of the time, because there's another little bit of me that thinks all we should be talking about at the moment is the creep of the United States into bog standard fascism. Well, not even bog standard fascism, but into a very peculiar and new brand of 21st century fascism. And of course, the people who did speak out in the Knesset about genocide and about Trump's unsuitability were pulled out of the meeting with no ceremony or whatsoever. So, what do you think you witnessed? What do you think happened? That quote from Trump in full, by the way, you'll be remembered far more for this than if you'd kept going for 3 or 4 more years of kill, 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 which, I mean, anybody paying proper attention would know that has appeared at many times, at many junctions, to be precisely what Benjamin Netanyahu wanted to do. It's the best way of prolonging his own career and his own survival. But Trump said it out loud. You'll be remembered far more for this than if you'd kept going for 3 or 4 more years of kill, kill, kill. That certainly wouldn't have been something that they were expecting to hear. Similarly, when he called the leader of the opposition a very nice man and told Netanyahu that he can be a little bit nicer now because you're not at war anymore. So, I mean, the other element of that, of course, was the fact that Trump didn't pay any lip service at all to the popular right-wing trope that was doing the rounds yesterday morning, that this was all about him bringing Hamas into line. A position you can only really hold if you completely ignore what the terrorist leaders had signed up to last January and last September. It was the pressure brought to bear on Netanyahu that brought about the peace, which many right-wing commentators in this country and the United States cannot actually accept. The reality is unbearable to them, and yet it is, I think, it's pretty close to observably true. And if there was any doubt about it at all, the fact that he didn't do a lap of honour yesterday about anything really involving the Hamas leadership, but did do a lap of honour involving persuading Benjamin Netanyahu not to kill, kill, kill anymore, was deeply significant. So I mean, I listened to the sort of round of congratulation and triumphalism with a growing sense of... there was a bit of disgust there because of the 70,000 and counting corpses that have been visited upon the Palestinian people, and that figure is going to climb and climb and climb as they dig dead people, dead babies out of the rubble. There was a little bit of early celebration about the release of the hostages, which is a wonderful thing, whichever way you look at it. But the absolute refusal and failure to acknowledge one of those phenomena just sort of grew, didn't it, in discomfort as this bizarre jamboree continued to unfold. And then, to my own shock and amazement, Donald Trump began to restore a sense of equilibrium, having done the lap of honour and sucked up all the sycophancy and done all the ludicrous stuff. And I know his motivation is probably just because he can see opportunities to make a ton of money in the Middle East. One of these countries has already given him a whopping great jumbo jet. Imagine what else might be on the horizon. No wonder he's laughing at Netanyahu, whose bribery allegations include champagne and cigars. Why aren't you asking for islands? Why aren't you asking for space diamonds? Why aren't you asking for, I don't know, bring me the head of Arturo Ui? That motivation is base. It's going to be self-aggrandizement and self-enrichment. We know that at every single turn. And yet it offered up, bizarrely, it offered up a corrective and an antidote to the triumphalism and celebration that we had previously witnessed. So I think I've given you a fairly accurate recollection of what we witnessed yesterday, just in case you weren't listening. And the reason I said that I don't know that I've ever presented a show like this before is that normally when I tell you that I want you to ring in and explain things to me, I've got a fairly firm grip on what I think about a subject. Sometimes you cleverly prise my fingers off it, and I end up, of course, having what we call a pendulum moment and believing the opposite of what I believed previously. But today doesn't feel like that. It's not one of those conversations, is it? It's not it's very hard to have a really strong opinion about it because everything was so conflicting and so contradictory. So what even question do I ask? Do I say, how do you make sense of it? Because I'm not sure that we can. This is the abiding theme of covering Donald Trump since he first threw his hat into the ring politically. This drive that many of us have to account for and understand things can be self-defeating sometimes. But you can't stop trying. What do you think happened yesterday? What went on yesterday? What was that all about? You may need to have a better grasp of domestic Israeli politics to bring some light to bear on parts of it. You may just have needed to see the clips on the news bulletins to see other parts of it. But what on earth was that all about? In terms of internal and external politics, in terms of domestic and international, in terms of Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, doing what no President of the United States of America was ever likely to do, and essentially throwing an Israeli Prime Minister under the proverbial bus, forcing him into a position he did not want to be in. And that was the point, wasn't it? That's why it was all so confusing. So it was obvious to anybody with their eyes open that Netanyahu had been essentially strong-armed, coerced into this position. The threat to withdraw support for Israel, the only way in which you could persuade this particular administration to adopt this particular position. Just 2 weeks previously, he'd been at the United Nations making it crystal clear that it was never going to happen. We will stand alone like Sparta or Millwall Football Club and deal with the alienation and deal with the animosity of the entire world. And then they started discussing almost immediately how wonderful it was and what a glorious victory they had pulled off. And you've sort of found your head spinning, your brain doing somersaults about how on earth you could be presenting to the world such an obviously and transparently inaccurate version of observable events. And then you began to think, well, maybe I've got everything wrong, and that maybe this is... And then Trump stands up and makes it clear that, no, that original version of observable events, while joining in with the victory parade, making it pretty clear that they were essentially trying to turn acquiescence to Trump's will into victory over what? Absolutely extraordinary. I just want you to tell me what you think. So there's not much particular pressure on you today. I don't know that. I mean, I do get paid for yesterday's show. Quite a few of you were worried that I might not actually qualify for my show fee. So please don't worry about that, despite the fact that I did barely nothing, except, again, for the avoidance of doubt, every single decision taken about what we would be taking live and what we would not be taking live, and when we'd be crossing and when we'd be interrupting and when we'd be jumping in. It was all taken entirely by me and Elliot, the producer. I felt, I don't know about you, mate, I felt a little bit exposed at times. I thought, what if this goes on for 17 hours? Are we going to have to stay here? Is Sheila going to be given the day off? Are we going to... I mean, that's what I mean by extraordinary and unprecedented. A couple of quasi-anti-Semitic comments coming in, insisting that I'd been ordered to do it or I had no choice. And I mentioned their existence solely to alert you to their absurdity, just as there were accusations of me being anti-Semitic by telling the truth about what has happened in Gaza, something that Benjamin Netanyahu is very fond to do. And, of course, the other thing he did was he kept conflating the Israeli his government's cause with Judaism in general. All those biblical references talking about Jews around the world in the context of the genocide in Gaza, which is a hideous thing to do, to try to sort of make it a question of faith as opposed to a question of support for a policy or a prime minister. And so there's just a few things for you to chew on. 20 minutes after 10 is the time. What happened? What was that all about? Go on. Take a moment. Pick up your phone and tell me. 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
2 minutes after 10. James, what we witnessed was an ego-rubbing ceremony. I didn't, says Francis in Oxford, I didn't hear anything about what the next steps were to secure this peace treaty. I don't know that you should have expected to, but of course... the ego-rubbing ceremony backfired a bit when you look at what he actually said about the background to the ceasefire agreement and indeed the depiction of Netanyahu's kill, kill, kill policy. Mike picks up on a theme I've already addressed. Do you still get paid when you have to sit there for 2 hours listening to a man-baby drone on like yesterday? What a gig. You're not wrong, Mike. James says, I agree he's a disgusting human being. However, it's quite fascinating because he just says whatever comes into his head. You have to guard against that feeling of... I like slowing down for a car crash, that rubbernecking feeling. Like to sit there trying, wow, I mean, this is incredible what he's doing. I mean, it's comical, but somebody who works for the BBC said to me years ago at the cricket, I don't know why I said it at the cricket, I'm turning into Donald Trump, that they'd been on the campaign trail. And it was a woman of colour. So, you know, she was clear on the misogyny and the racism and under no illusions whatsoever about the self-confessed sex offending and all the rest of it. I think it may have been before he started the insurrection and lied about election results. But she said it is mesmeric when you're in the room. She said, I've never seen anything like it. And I dismissed it as a bit of hyperbole. But you kind of got an idea of it yesterday. And Michael suggests this was the terrifying moment when Trump realised he is now the autocratic bully he admires so much and can embrace that role without feeling like an imposter. It was the moment when he, backed by his capitalist hyperbros, had the epiphany that they can now turn their sights on Ukraine and China and make hideous amounts of money on war and death and weapons of neo-colonialism. I think you may, Michael, with respect, be jumping the gun slightly on that, but in the absence of really neat and codified encapsulations of what we witnessed, there's almost room for anything. Shai's in Greenwich. Shai, what would you like to say?
Hello. I watched yesterday and I thought, I'm not going to watch, but then I ended up watching it by thinking I really don't want to watch it. And it started off a bit surreal. Then I was laughing a bit. And then at the end of it, I was so confused. And it genuinely felt like I was in an episode of Black Mirror. I just couldn't put into words how... I felt, and then I cried for about half an hour afterwards.
Really?
And I was so disturbed by it.
That's fascinating, because you couldn't put into words why you were disturbed, but you could react emotionally, because it was in many ways a good day, and it was it was a cessation of the hostilities in Gaza, the release of the remaining hostages. These are things objectively to celebrate, but there was a discombobulation.
Absolutely, and I think what made it worse was seeing clips of this 18-year-old boy who was autistic. And I have a child who's on the spectrum, and seeing this kid come out, and he looked so confused, and he'd been in prison for 2 years because he was in a hospital with his mum, and I think his mum had been shot.
Oh my God! And
just seeing his face and thinking, where's he going to go? You know, you've got pictures of the hostages going to come to nice hotels and a little teddy bear on the bed with messages, and I'm thinking, where are these kids going to go? The ones who've been imprisoned for no reason. This child wouldn't have even known what was going on.
There's still thousands of them there, but that wasn't what we were expecting yesterday's speeches to involve, or yesterday's events.
know, I didn't expect him to address that, but the fact that what lacked was any humanity, I think that's what I found really hard to stomach.
I mean, if you were watching it without sound, you could have been forgiven for thinking it was some sort of party.
Oh, my days.
And Trump went in on that. I mean, it is to have a peace settlement that completely ignores. I think he was the first person to say the word Palestinian out loud. I don't know, maybe we're being naive. Maybe you don't acknowledge the 70,000 people you've killed when you're celebrating the fact that you've now been ordered to stop killing. There you go. There's a nice little sentence that makes sense of the madness. You're having a celebration about, without mentioning all the people you've killed, you're celebrating being ordered to stop killing them.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, to be fair, he couldn't have. We wouldn't have expected him to. But I think just listening to him go on and congratulate everyone, including his main donor, Miriam.
Yeah, that was a moment.
And then, wasn't then talking about.
It used to be, and I think it probably still should be. It used to considered anti-Semitic to ask people where their loyalties lie. So to ask Jewish people who they were more loyal to, Israel or the country that they were living in. But Trump, I don't think, will get into any trouble for doing that yesterday. Thank you, Shai. That's really honest. And that actually, that is the caller equivalent of my introduction, in that I don't have the words. That's what I meant when I said I've never really had this before during the time that we've spent together. My job is to put into words what is going on. And I can't just burst into tears and broadcast that, tempting though it may have been at various points over the last decade. It's not really an option for us. But Shai has somehow articulated the fact that is a viable response. There's a sense of, it's a word I use too much, but sometimes it's the only word that works. And this discombobulation, it's probably a bit mild, a bit comical, isn't it? Profound discomfort. Disgust? Not quite, is it? It's because you can usually articulate precisely what you're disgusted by. And speaking of things that are overused, normally I'd caution against comparing things to Black Mirror, the Charlie Brooker masterpiece series. But it's a bit like Godwin's Law, or Goodwin's Law. The fellow who came up with the idea that every time there's an argument online, it will eventually end with someone calling someone else a Nazi. And then during Donald Trump's first presidential campaign, Goodwin went public and said, no, fill your boots. On this time, it's not. It's perfectly reasonable. It's perfectly acceptable. And sometimes Black Mirror is the perfect, or the Twilight Zone, it would have been back in the day, is the perfect exemplar of what we're witnessing. 0345 6060973 is the number you need to tell me what happened in that room yesterday. That bizarre combination of triumphalism. I think that's a sentence that helps. Celebrating being ordered to stop killing people without mentioning all the people that you've killed. That perhaps speaks to why I felt a really weird sense of... I'm going to say that word again, discombobulation. But what did you see? What did you witness? What do you think was happening? 0345 6060973 is the number you need. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
32 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, when we are trying to make sense of what we witnessed yesterday. Here's one. Idiot's Corner, even today's doing some business. This is from Jeffrey. Your one-sided diatribe is so laughable. No reference to the body language insult dished out to your favourite UK PM. What about discussing the misogynistic decision of Tower Hamlets? No, you just want to promote Hamas propaganda. I don't think that Keir Starmer was in Jerusalem yesterday, mate. And there was an uncomfortable moment, wasn't there, where he thought that Donald Trump was inviting him to speak because the Pakistani president had spoken a few minutes before, but he wasn't. He was just sort of saying hello and shaking hands, and it looked uncomfortable. But I don't know what you're on. Shall we have a look at Jeffrey's history? See the sort of messages that he routinely sends to LBC. You are a left-wing mindless git. That wasn't even on my show. You didn't ask why your mate's mum couldn't speak English. Could it have been that her culture prevented it? You only stay relatively silent with those who happen to match your personal views. I bet if I was cleared to call you, you would talk over everything I say. Well, if you're going to say, in response to a question about what happened in Jerusalem yesterday, why aren't you talking about something that happened in Sharm el-Sheikh? Then yes, mate, I would have to interrupt you. But that's because you're an idiot. It's not because of any sort of inherent prejudice or bias on... Well, no, I am very biased against idiots, which is why I've created an entire corner for them. And you're in it. 10:34 is the time. Raf is in The Hague. What happened, Raf? What did we witness?
Hi, James.
Hello,
first-time caller.
Well, you've chosen an interesting topic to break your duck on. Good luck.
Thank you. I think, in short, that... the speech, the nature of the speech, the sycophancy, also to the presentation of it as some kind of victory was to appease the more extreme factions of the Knesset, specifically people like Ben Gvir or Smotrich. Smotrich, about 5 days ago, said that although he felt immense joy, he had a tremendous fear of the consequences of emptying the prisons and releasing the next generation of terrorist leaders, as he says,
yes,
who will do everything to continue spilling rivers of Jewish blood, God forbid, is what he said. I think that this choice of the ceasefire, the pressure that Trump put on Netanyahu makes him weaker in the eyes of the more extreme factions of the Knesset. And in order to appease those factions, they will have to present it in such a way that it is a victory, that Netanyahu stands strong, and which strengthens his position and allows him to remain in the Knesset, as you often mention,
and again could be the early warning of a snap election, which would have been unthinkable a year ago. I've read some. I think in the New York Times this morning, a veteran commentator on Israeli politics suggesting that becomes a real possibility if, I think your analysis is brilliant, by the way, if your inflationary analysis is correct. They're trying to inflate a bubble. I mean, it is a bubble. It will be full of hot air, but if there's enough hot air, then it might just rise into the air and carry Netanyahu over the threshold of another coalition with room still for the far-right members that you've alluded to. And the only way that you can keep them sweet is to pretend that this is a glorious victory.
Indeed. Also, the ceasefire agreement, has a small paragraph that reads, I will repeat it now, "We are united in our determination to dismantle extremism and radicalization in all its forms. No society can flourish when violence and racism is normalized, or when radical ideologies threaten the fabric of civil life. We commit to addressing the conditions that enable extremism and to promoting education, opportunity, and mutual respect as foundations for lasting peace."
Yes.
Now, this is absurd, absolutely absurd to sign when the extremism, as well from Trump, as well from the Knesset, is still allowed. But they have to. This is also incendiary language towards those people who might be framed as extreme, further risking the position of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Gosh. I mean, he's got people in his cabinet who've got the criminal records to prove it, hasn't he? What then do you say about that pivot? So Trump went along with it, and part of the reason for the lengthy delay may have been to clear with him how long he was going to have to sit on the stage witnessing a victory parade that was built upon being ordered to stop doing what you wanted to carry on doing. And I mean, I don't know that he would have been there against his will. Do you know what I mean? I mean, he did refer to it. Actually, no, again. God, this is interesting stuff. Because again, he couldn't help it. So very undiplomatic to essentially complain about how long it took and make jokes about there being nobody left in Israel by the time, in Egypt, by the time he got there. So I don't know that he was fully signed up for the length of that saga, that extraordinary behaviour. But the bits of his speech that were not scripted, and it was very easy to tell from his tone of voice when he was going off script, they didn't fit entirely with what you said, did they? The bits when he said, kill, 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 and he said, you know, BB, you've got to stop doing the kill, 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 which is not what he would have been wanting to hear, because of course they've denied that they've been embarked upon a bloodthirsty path, and they will continue to do so despite all of the absolutely incontrovertible evidence to the opposite. Tom Peck puts it very well in the Times today. Contrary to popular belief and countless horrific hours of TV footage, kill, kill, kill was never quite the publicly acknowledged strategy. And then he poured a little bit of praise on the opposition leader, as if he was saying, oh, there's a guy I could do business with. It just almost sort of, I don't know, turning the screw slightly on Netanyahu in that bit of the speech, which doesn't fit with everything that went before.
Indeed. And that provides a large risk for Netanyahu if he wants to not end up in jail. Yeah, unless he gets the pardon, which he then asked for, presumably on the grounds that he doesn't understand why anyone could get into trouble for allegedly accepting bribes as piffling as champagne and cigars when there are entire jumbo jets on the table that he could have been asking for. Indeed.
It's crazy, isn't it? And yet, and this is the bit I'm struggling with, Raf, let me level with you, because I castigate other people for being distracted from the sheer horror of what Trump's administration is inflicting on the United States of America. But I'm very, very guilty of that today and yesterday. I still think that we the world, certainly the people passionately opposed to the genocide in Gaza, are in a better place than we were a week ago.
And that is the difficult reality we have to live with. We are.
Yeah, that is.
And which is a bit. It provides a lot of cognitive dissonance with me personally.
Yeah. Well, I came up with a line yesterday, which is clumsy. It's a very blunt instrument, and it has no nuance to it whatsoever. But if Hitler came up with a cure for cancer, you'd be an idiot not to take it, right?
Indeed.
Raf, thank you. A brilliant debut. I look forward to your future contributions to the programme. What do you think happened yesterday? It was so bizarre. That was the thing. It's so nice to talk about things. I do. I was the opposite of yesterday's show when I couldn't say a single thing. I barely got a word in edgeways. But to just talk this stuff through when you're feeling confused. You know, poor old Shai bursting into tears at the lack of articulation on why do I feel so uncomfortable. But then you play that card and then you put the other card on the table that says we're better off than we were a week ago. That the cause for optimism, it's so bizarre. The chance of peace is probably greater when you look at all the other Middle Eastern countries that turned up in Egypt yesterday in Sharm el-Sheikh. I remember the leader of Turkey wouldn't go because of that late invitation extended to Netanyahu, and he wouldn't go until it was confirmed that Netanyahu wouldn't be going. So a reminder of the complications. But Trump, driven chiefly by self-aggrandizement and a desire to make a ton of money. There was one hot mic moment, I don't know if you saw this, where it appeared that one Middle Eastern leader was talking about needing to talk to Donald Jr. or Eric, the idiot's sons. Imagine that, having a family where they're all Fredos, all the sons of Fredos, and talking about a better price or so. God knows what's going on behind the scenes. But Trump will be seeing this as a business opportunity. And some of those Middle Eastern leaders are a lot more used to him commercially than any Israeli leader could ever be. No accident that he picked up on the woman in the audience who'd given him, I think, $100 million for his last campaign. That's the language he speaks. But what if that language translates into a much better chance of peace, sustainable peace, than all of the diplomacy and politicking that I don't know, I'm not quite ready to go there yet, but when Raf uses the phrase cognitive dissonance, it's almost not big enough to actually even contemplate the possibility that while he's introducing what is increasingly obvious fascism in the United States of America, he's complicit or party to a ludicrous attempt in Jerusalem to pretend that being ordered to stop killing people when you wanted to carry on is some glorious victory. And then he turns up in the Middle East to say, let's talk business. Let's talk Turkey. Qatar's building a military base in the United States, and just a year ago they gave him a $400 million jumbo jet. What if actually the world is so... I can't say this out loud, can I? What if the whole world is so bent and corrupt that the most bent and corrupt man is the one that can make it work best in specific moments, like conflict? Oh no, that's a horrible thing. Bulama, twice in 2 weeks. That's actually twice in a week, Bulama. It's not only a breach of standards on this programme, but a reflection of how much we value your insights. You watched the speech, you listened to the speech. What on earth do you think was happening?
No, thank you, James, for having me twice in 2 weeks, because I called last week.
You did.
James, I was looking at the speech from three different perspectives, listening to it with you yesterday.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually be professional for the first time in 20 years. I get my amount of years in this job mixed up with my marriage sometimes. I'm going to come to you after the break. Is that all right? Because I want to hear everything you've got to say. I notice that the clock is ticking along. And I mean, the question is really straightforward. What is happening? What was happening? And Bulama's insights, I don't want to put any extra pressure on him, but he's never let us down yet.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:47 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Some breaking news for you. Grim, but one hopes not as grim as the headlines may initially suggest. Israeli troops have killed 6 people in Gaza, describing them as suspects and explaining that they had apparently approached IDF soldiers, had crossed a line that they are not supposed to cross, and so they have been shot dead. The IDF claims it warned the so-called suspects from approaching the borderline, but says they did not comply and continued to approach the forces, and the forces carried out shooting to remove the threat, the IDF statement has said. The IDF calls on the residents of Gaza to heed the IDF's instructions and not to approach forces deployed in the area. And there it is. So, I've got nothing to add to that. Those are the facts as we have them. The announcement has been made by the IDF on social media, but the death of 6, quotes, suspects, end quotes, less than 24 hours after the ceasefire was signed will give serious cause for pause, perhaps. 10:49 is the time. Back to Bulama and the question of what you think was happening yesterday.
Yeah, no, thank you, James. As I was saying, I was looking at it from 3 different perspectives, listening to yesterday's event with you.
Yes.
The first is from inside the whole and my personal perspective. I think what was happening yesterday was an attempt by Netanyahu and Israeli politicians to massage Trump's ego and ingratiate themselves even more to him and to manipulate him about the next phases of the process. And that's why the speeches and the applauses and everything was all about Trump. The standing ovation before he started, the applause after every sentence, and the speeches they made before him of his nomination for the Israeli Award for the Nobel Peace, and even them demeaning other American presidents and politicians who have stood with Israel and have defended Israel militarily and diplomatically all this while.
So I mean, that I hadn't thought of that. So, Biden facing pretty clear criticism for not having exerted sufficient pressure on Netanyahu to get him to sign up to this deal when it was on the table last September.
Yeah, it was.
And then they attacked Biden.
Mm-hmm. And also Obama, they were saying you are not just another American president. One of the speakers said, meaning that other American presidents were just insane. American presidents.
No, this is insane.
Yeah.
This is insane because this is what you're saying is that they have the president who has stood up to them is the one that ends up getting the tribute.
Yes, because he is a strong man, because he has strong-armed Netanyahu, and these presidents who have stood with them all their tenures. And remember, James, that Israel was a bipartisan issue in the United States.
Yes, of course.
Every political party supported them across the aisles. And I was seated thinking, what will Obama make of this? What will Biden make of this? What will Democrats make of this? Is Netanyahu making a mistake to divide Americans along political lines when it comes to Israel? Because he is not only pandering to Trump now, to the Republicans, but to the Trump wing of the Republican Party. He is becoming mega, and I don't know whether that is good for Israel going forward.
Well, it would have been propelled, and this is something that the two men probably have in common, entirely by self-interest.
Exactly, yeah, I completely agree. And then it came to Netanyahu's speech, James, which was, like you said, anything but reconciliatory. It was triumphant, it was unapologetic, it was threatening at some points, and this will make the next phases of peace in the Middle East even more difficult because, I mean, you say he makes references to the Bible. I mean, for me, that's another evidence of his radicalization. The way he spoke was another evidence of his radicalization and his desire to continue what he believes perhaps is his divine mission or something along those lines.
This is madness, isn't it? Because, I mean, this means that's why... that's why everyone, or many people getting in touch today, have been describing a sense of profound discomfort and discombobulation, but they couldn't quite work out why. And I think you've nailed one of the biggest reasons. It's because that they are treating the guy who actually forced them to do something they didn't want to do with levels of sycophancy that would embarrass, ancient Greek potentates. They are laying it on thicker than ever before for the one that actually made them do what they didn't want to do. And because it suits him and he likes it, they're then attacking all of the presidents, the past presidents, who failed, refused, or declined to tell them to stop doing what they were doing.
Exactly, who were nice with them. And I think that will affect how they will be treated by U.S. politicians, especially Democrats and those Republicans that do not support Trump in the future. And remember that one of the speakers, and I think it was the Speaker of the House that says we are a nation that doesn't forget or that does remembers favors. But they didn't remember what Biden did. They didn't remember what...
Biden got about 100 hostages released.
Yeah, but they didn't remember that. They said you are the best president ever. Yeah. You are not just another American president. You are the best friend of Israel and all that. And then James, Trump's speech was an attempt, of course, to continue to ventilate his political grievances and to make himself the center of attention. It was him doing everything. I called so-so person, I met so-so person, I know so-so person, and he kept on going and going and going. And Trump, as you remember, James, Trump only mentioned Palestine twice yesterday in the speech.
But I think that was it was more than anyone else did.
Yeah, it was more than anyone else did, and that takes me to my third point. But before I make the third point, but Trump was praising Netanyahu for making good use of the weapons he gave him.
Yeah, that's
for
true.
Getting
that was horrible.
14,000 children that were killed using American weapons.
I think you used them pretty well, he said, or something like that.
Yeah, you used them pretty well.
God, no wonder people were bursting into tears. That's just hideous.
Yeah, and remember, Trump, James, that Trump is going to head the board of peace.
Yes.
And if you are heading the board of peace, you have to maintain some semblance of neutrality so that you may command the respect of both parties.
Of course.
He visited Israel. Yesterday, you said what could have gone better in the last 72 hours. He should have visited Gaza to see things for himself, and so that may counterbalance what he saw in Israel. But he didn't do that. Even, James, how it was covered. We saw live coverage on split screen of 20 Israeli hostages returning and of the Israeli parliament. But where are the 1,700 or 1,900 Palestinians that were released? Where are the thousands and hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that were going back to the rubble and trying to dig up their children that have been buried there for months? Where are they? Do they matter? Are they human beings like Israelis? Or are they just treated as marginal nodes? And so the third perspective I was looking at, James, was what would an ordinary Palestinian begging for peace and freedom and sovereignty think of what happened yesterday?
What happened in the Knesset? Well, the triumphalism and the celebration would be impossible to. I mean, it'd be repulsive, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And so I was thinking, will they feel neglected, marginalized, treated as marginal, not if anything at all? Or will they think, oh, we are also human beings, we are recognized as human beings, and we would extend the same courtesy to our neighbors? So, James, I was looking at it from my perspective, from the perspective of American Democrats, especially President Biden, and also from the perspective of an ordinary Palestinian.
And then it becomes an even more unpleasant spectacle than what it would be for anybody else, except, I suppose, people who support what Netanyahu has done in Gaza. And they should be the most disappointed people of all, because he has been prevented from carrying on. That twist there, it's the absolute upside down, Balama, isn't it? It's literally up is down. You know, war is strength, freedom is slavery. We have been coerced into doing something we didn't want to do, and we're now going to do a lap of honour. And Trump knows it. That's why he can stay calm. That's why he can sort of make the odd joke about how long it's going on for, and then actually, you know, and make the disgusting comments about how well used these weapons have been during a genocide, and then hit Netanyahu with things that he wouldn't want to hear about his policy being kill at this. He just says everything, doesn't he, in the same space, so you can't really accuse him of believing in anything.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. And that's why then you start questioning whether the initial attempt to ingratiate themselves and to manipulate him worked. Because he said lots of things that no one would have thought an American president would say, much less inside the Israeli parliament. And also his remarks around Iran, especially when he moved to Sharm el-Sheikh and about their attempt to work with the Iranians. I don't think Netanyahu, from the way he spoke yesterday and from his conduct over the last 2 years, wants to normalize with Iran or with anything or with anyone, or wants to bring back peace to the Middle East. And it was very difficult, but I mean, especially I think it would have been a very, very difficult listening for an ordinary Palestinian who wants freedom and wants to be treated.
You're absolutely right. That's part of what I was struggling with yesterday, because I began the programme at 10 o'clock feeling very upbeat, and I was watching images coming from Gaza and seeing Palestinian people in states of euphoria, and albeit that the terrible tides of humanity making their way north in Gaza were walking through scenes that looked like they'd come from a science fiction hellscape, that they were happy to be heading back, and then to listen to that extraordinary round of self-congratulation was hideously discomforting. It really was. Yeah. Do you... Yeah. I mean, Raf was the first to use the phrase cognitive dissonance on the programme today. It pops up a lot. But the idea that, albeit everything you've said is true, things are still better than they were a week ago.
No, definitely, absolutely better.
Crazy.
The hostages are back. 1,700 of the Palestinians that were released are people who were never charged, and so they were essentially just taken from their homes and kept in Israeli custodies without any charge or trial. And and even the prospect that the guns are now silent, the jets are no longer flying with the bombs, and even seeing, the jubilant families in Israel, but also the air trucks moving into Gaza, the families going back. And I mean, I fought back tears yesterday when I saw a Palestinian, over the cloud, because his house was standing. He was running. I don't know if you saw that video. No. Everyone's house was down, but when he went, he saw his house still standing, and he was so happy.
Oh, God.
And so, And on a lighter note, James, I felt pity for you yesterday, and I was like, James would have to bottle his thoughts for the next 24 hours.
Well, I'm glad you were listening, because you crystallised and articulated a lot of stuff that I'm not bright enough to have spotted, actually, or well-informed enough to have noted. Bulama, I say it every time you come on, but it is an absolute pleasure, and indeed many, many people joining me in acknowledging just how brilliant your contributions always are, but today you have excelled yourself. Thank you, and do take care. The time is 11:01.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11 is the time. We're going for the double. A few of you pointing out that the other person who has provided us with extraordinary insight and help in recent years, the last 2 years in particular, on this issue is of course Noga Tarnopolsky, the freelance journalist based in Jerusalem. So we will try and get hold of her before the end of the programme today. But we're going to return now to a topic that used to be the bread and butter of this programme. Can you guess what it is? I've given you a clue. There's an alliteration already by using the phrase bread and butter. I don't know. I went through a period, do you remember I told you, where despite the fact that it in many ways turned my career upside down, I was just a humble radio host ploughing a lonely furrow of centrism and fact-based reporting when the rest of the world was going slowly by. No one noticed me. And then Brexit came along, and suddenly, for quite a long time, actually, we seemed to be the only place in the country, or the only place in the UK media, where some relatively straightforward questions would be asked on a very regular basis. And purely because of the aligning of planets with viral clips and political... is febrility a word? Political fever. It just sort of turned the show into something that I don't know anybody ever really expected it would be. And then I told you about a year ago that I was bored of talking about Brexit. Not for the same reasons everybody who voted for it was bored or pretended to be bored. That would be shame, guilt, and an utter inability to admit having made a terrible, terrible mistake. But I felt that there was little point talking about it because it wasn't going to achieve anything. You know, at the moment when you realised it was time probably for a pause was the moment when you heard big Brexit cheerleaders insisting that we shouldn't talk about it anymore. I mean, that is such an admission of idiocy that it barely merits explanation, does it? What's that thing? You know that thing you told us was going to be brilliant? It's not going very well. Oh, we don't talk about that anymore. Didn't Farage even do it on Question Time with Alistair Campbell once? No, we don't talk about that anymore. No, why would we talk about that? It's a bit like buying a house off somebody and then 10 years later, when you're still living in a hole, being told, can you stop asking about the house, please, that I sold you 10 years ago? It's ridiculous that you're still talking about the house I sold you 10 years ago. Yeah, all right, you're still living in the hole you were living in when you gave me all your money, and I gave you a key, didn't I? I gave you a sovereign key. See what I did there? I gave you a sovereign key. Why are you still asking for the house? Stop talking about the house, you losers. You've got house derangement syndrome, you have. Always banging on about the house that you bought 10 years ago and you've never seen hide nor hair of. You've got a sovereign key. I told you a million times, it's all about the sovereign key. Forget about the house. Daily Mail does it a bit today. Extraordinarily, they say. One of my favourite words. Horrible to see it in this organ. Extraordinarily, Wes Streeting suggested Labour wants to have a debate about the consequences of Brexit. Why is that extraordinary? You helped it happen, lads. Some would argue you made it happen. The Daily Mail's fever pitch, madness during that period was visible from space. Editor-in-Chief Paul Dacre attacking the High Court judges for being independent, attacking elected parliamentarians for being independent, attacking universities for being independent, all while demanding that we should somehow be freed from obeying rules that none of them could ever name. That's the sliding doors moment for me, isn't it? Well, I wish I'd paid more attention at the time to the very first time I said to a caller, well, what laws is it? Why do you want to leave? Gosh, I'm sick of obeying all those laws. What laws? And then it became a catchphrase almost, or a recurring theme. It all started with the Daily Mail's madness, telling people, a bit like immigration. It's like there are no immigrants in the areas of the country where antipathy towards immigration is highest. Oh, they're awful. I don't mean the ones you know, I mean the ones you don't know. Same with laws. There's these bloody laws that you have to obey. And all they could ever come up with was stuff about hoovers or light bulbs, which was almost always nonsense anyway, or bloody bananas. That's the last B word that I'll use. And so when they start saying, oh, you can't talk about it anymore, that's when you realise that we probably do actually just need to pause. The question then became, when is it time to talk about it again? Because not talking about the fact that you bought a house 10 years ago and you still haven't seen a single brick of it is obviously a fraudster's charter. The only people who benefit from a public discourse in which the people who told you to vote for Brexit are now telling you that we should not have any conversations whatsoever about whether it's gone well or badly is like them waving an enormous flag that says it's gone really, really badly, but we don't like to talk about it. It's like Basil Fawlty and the war, isn't it? So, Wes Streeting has broken cover. 2 headlines here. This is absolutely extraordinary, even by the pitiful standards of Paul Dacre's Daily Mail. He's still in the building, although the editor these days is a chap called Ted Verity. Streeting, this is the Times. No, it's not. It's the Telegraph. It's the Times or the Telegraph. I've chopped it out of the paper and I can't quite tell from the typeface at first glance. So not by any stretch of the imagination a sane or rational organ when it comes to Brexit, although the Times at the time didn't do too badly. Wes Streeting has said he is glad we can now admit Brexit is a problem. Okay, what a supremely uncontroversial comment that is. I think it's the Telegraph. Wes Streeting has... I told you, the news pages of the Telegraph are sometimes very, very much at odds with the absolute madness that populates the comment pages, albeit that I worry that they've sent out an order to stop printing such unhinged headlines because they're embarrassed by how much fun we have with them on this programme. Wes Streeting has said he is glad he can now admit Brexit is a problem. Streeting, I'm glad we can now admit that Brexit is a problem. It's one of those lovely stories where the first line does exactly what the headline has told you it's going to do. Move into Daily Mail land. Streeting mocked after he blames Labour's failings on the Brexit vote. Wes Streeting has pointed the finger at Brexit for Labour's miserable first 15 months in power. Well, he hasn't. He's just pointed out that a lot of our fiscal problems come from the fact that we became the first population in the history of humanity to literally vote to impose economic sanctions on ourselves and decimate GDP. Things that are facts. Observable facts. So, Keir Starmer upset many of you when he refused to go there, despite having been a fairly ardent campaigner for truth during the Brexit years, up to and including calls for a second referendum, which in retrospect probably was all a little bit rose-tinted and over-optimistic. But it is clear that Brexit has done untold damage to the country, and it was clear for a long time that nobody was prepared to say so. And I'm not sure that we ever fully understood why. We're not joining again anytime soon. That ship has sailed, and it might sail back into view at some point, but I don't know that it will be during Keir Starmer's lifetime, as he himself has observed. That's probably a little bit too pessimistic, but it's not going to hove back into view until our former partners in Europe, our former fellow members of the largest single market and free trade area in history, are persuaded that we're not going to have another psychodrama and we're not going to have another civil war and we're not going to tear ourselves and each other to shreds again in pursuit of either a mythical Camelot or boring old reality. So that was part of the reason why they didn't go there. That was part of the reason why they didn't use it as an explanation for what was going on in the country. The idea that you can have... So where would it begin? Johnson, what's her name? Sunak, and now Starmer for a year. 4 prime ministers, all committed to the idea that Brexit wasn't a disaster for our country. All of them, all 4 of them. Stephen Bush has written another brilliant piece in the Financial Times today about how this refusal to admit that it's gone badly means that the Conservative Party is full of people who are either liars or idiots. That's not quite how he put it. He's a lot more measured than I am. He points out that because you have to pretend that you believe it was a brilliant idea, even if, like Liz Truss, you were perfectly clear about how awful it would be prior to 2016 or 2019, when a lot of them came into Parliament, the Conservative Party has turned itself into a talent vacuum. So if you add to that my explanation last week about that cull of decent MPs or MPs that were prepared to tell the truth in 2019, and then add that if you wanted to join the party after that, you had to pretend that you thought it was a good idea, even if you were on the record prior to 2016 being opposed to it, you've got a party that is built on nonsense. It is literally built on nonsense and incompetence. And that's bad for everybody. But the decision was taken by the Labour Party, and not by the Liberal Democrats, but by the main opposition party, that it went badly. But they weren't going to talk about it. Is it time to talk about it now? Now, I argued with you a bit, and you got quite upset with me, because I am James O'Brexit, after all. And you felt that I was rather letting the side down when I said there's no point having this conversation at this point. And Keir Starmer is wary of getting absolutely kebabbed by all the usual suspects if he tells the truth on this issue, and there's nothing to be gained from doing so. That's Ming Va's territory. It's a crucial bit of the equation. There's nothing to be gained from doing so. Okay? That's the point. Yes, it might be true, but politics is about pragmatism. There is nothing to be gained from doing this. Right? Is there anything to be gained now? 0345 6060973. You don't need to read this article in the Daily Mail to know that they will have phoned up Nigel Farage and invited him to deny any responsibility for the thing that has defined his entire career so far. Let me see if I can find it. Asked how Brexit was to blame. Here we go. But Mr Farage said Labour can try any excuse they like, but they can't escape the reality that Rachel from accounts has the UK economy flatlining. This government has no experience of business. Last business that Nigel Farage was involved in before his current business, which is currently a political party, or his private business, which has seen him make £1 million, I think, in the last year while he was supposed to be representing the members of Clacton. The last business I remember him involved with was subject to a winding up order from His Majesty's or Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. But this nonsense he spouts that he's somehow experienced in business. Have you seen what's happened to their £90 billion tax cut pledge? You know, they said they were going to save £90 billion on public... So, yeah, they've just abandoned that quietly. I don't know if it's in the Daily Mail, but why would it be? Because they get to choose what everybody else wants to talk about. This government hasn't... So Farage has gone for it. And if you were really desperate... Actually, let's do this as a game. If you were really, really desperate... So let me give you a little insight into how journalism works. When you're charged with writing a story that you know is a load of old hogwash, you need to get other people quoted in it. Right, so you need to ring up someone. So you might ring up Jacob Rees-Mogg, but he's not an MP anymore. That was democracy in action. You need to get some quotes in it so that the hogwash you're punting in order to keep your ridiculous editor suite doesn't look quite as hogwash. Oh, look, you want to be able to put an article together that you're not too ashamed to put your name on. And that involves passing the buck to other people. So you're pretending that there is something in any way surprising or controversial or cowardly about pointing out the impact Brexit has had upon our economy. Literally, you're pretending that it is mad for a politician in power to point out that the huge holes left in our fiscal health by this decision taken at your encouragement in 2016. So what you need to do is get some quotes in the story, right? You know this. But what you don't know is how desperate that can sometimes be. It's a bit like LBC producers finding a guest for a programme to explain a position that nobody really agrees with, but you need some, and some presenters feel the need to have someone to come on and pretend, for example, that you can get thrown in jail in this country for saying that you were born and bred here, or whatever that I've got missed information on that story for you later in the programme. And you hear them go, oh no, okay, sorry, that's fine. Yeah, well, hopefully we'll see you again soon, and then put the phone on. Is there any chance you could come on and talk about flags? No, I'm fine. Okay. And newspapers do it. It's where I first learned the tactic. And it goes through their whole context book. So on this one, who do you think they ended up with? If I said to you, the final proof of how pathetic this story is contained within the identity of the person quoted in the final paragraph. So you're trying to pretend that talking about Brexit as a reason for some of our economic woes is a bad thing to do. A bit like, you know, talking about water being a reason why we're wet being a bad thing to do. who would be the absolute gold standard of contributor, the person that you would ring last and go, oh, everyone else has said no. Is there any way you could give me a quote for tomorrow's Daily Mail about why the current government shouldn't be talking about the damage that Brexit has done to our economic health, despite the fact that literally everybody in the world can see it from space? Who would be that person? I'm going to leave that one hanging over the course of the next break. But the question I want you to answer, which you could be forgiven for having forgotten, but let me remind you, is it time? Is it time for the government, for the Labour government, to start hitting its opponents, most obviously, I suppose, the Tories and Farage, over the head with the absolute mess, the absolute disaster they inflicted on the country without barely an apology or an acknowledgement of guilt or responsibility? Is it time, and will it work? 0345 6060 973. Is it time? Starmer has signalled that this was going to happen. Streeting has done it. Brexit, as an obvious and real contributory culprit to economic woes, is back in the game. Is it time? And will it work? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And to my utter shock, maybe everyone's forgotten him. Nobody has currently guessed correctly who the most desperate recipient of a call from the Daily Mail in the hope of shoring up an absolute nonsense of a story is. It's not Daniel Hannan, Mike. It's not Liz Truss, Alex. It's not David Davis. It's not hard man of Brexit, Steve Baker. It's not Patrick Minford. God, he's getting a lot of votes. I've got a very well-informed audience. It's not Nadine Dorries. She's getting quite a few votes as well. No one has got it. It's not John Redwood. It's not Anne Widdecombe. It's not... You've forgotten. Good grief, there's a name I haven't seen in a while. It's not Digby Pudding Jones. Who is it? Arguably the most ridiculous of them all. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Who is the most ridiculous Brexiter of them all?
James O'Brien on LBC.
There's hundreds of texts to come. I think that's the most popular text thing we've done in months, isn't it? But all these names... Oh, God, I'd forgotten that some of these people existed. It's not Dunkin' Donuts. No, we've said it's not Rees-Mogg, Brexit Hardman, Grizzly Stewart. Good Lord, it's these terrible... I mean, none of them taking any responsibility. It's not Mr. Weatherspoons, Nick. Mark was the first one to get it right, which is interesting, because I wonder whether it stuck in your mind, Mark, because you share the same Christian name as the person of whom we speak. The proof that the Daily Mail was absolutely desperate to find... Not even 30p Lee gets a look in on this one. Absolutely. We've got to find someone to support the notion that you shouldn't talk about the thing that we described as the single most important thing to happen to Britain since the Second World War. You shouldn't talk about it anymore. Think about that. That's the logic of these people. Yeah, it's the most important thing that's happened to Britain since the Second World War. Wow. We'll be talking about that for years. Oh, no. We don't talk about it anymore. Why not? Well, I told you, we don't talk about it anymore, so I can't answer that question. Oh. So it was the best thing to happen to Britain since the Second World War, but 5 years later we don't talk about it anymore. I think we can join the dots there. Is it time for the opposition, in this case the Labour government, the Labour Party, to talk about it now? And the answer to the question, I've given you a fairly huge clue, although the suggestions are still pouring in. It's Mark Francois. How have people forgotten Mark Francois? Why was Brexit hardman Steve Baker, even Dominic Cummings, getting loads more votes? Boris Johnson getting loads more votes. Why did everyone forget old Marky Mark Francois? That's just cruel. Poor Marky Mark. Oh, well, we haven't forgotten. Well, actually, I kind of had until I got to the end of the article and thought, oh, my God, he's still a thing. You'll be telling me next that Gavin Williamson is still in Parliament. Sorry, Sir Gavin Williamson. Anyway, back to Brexit. Oh, that feels good. I haven't said that for a while. Let's say it again. Anyway, back to Brexit. Nick's in Wimborne. Nick, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James. Thanks for inviting me on.
You're very welcome.
It's been a while, and this is...
Well, to be fair, I invite everyone on every day, Nick, but I like the fact that you've taken it personally.
Well, it being my favourite subject.
Yes.
And us 48%, they haven't gone away. We've only grown in numbers. And so is it time now to talk about Brexit now? Well, you know, the first party to actually start campaigning to take us back into the single market or customs union or full re-entry, but that's probably not possible at this time, gets my vote, whoever it is, even if it's Farage, and that's saying something really incredible.
It's not really. Well, yeah, but I'll tell you what, if he starts campaigning to rejoin the Europe... Actually, we're talking about Nigel Farage, aren't we? I'd believe anything from him. Anyway, carry on. It's unlikely at the moment.
I mean, the Labour Party, it wants an engine of growth. And we took the batteries out of our engine in growth, threw them away by leaving the EU, obviously. You know, our GDP was always pretty much in front of the EU, year upon year upon year. Companies came here, as we know. I won't reinforce the old arguments.
No, sure.
But if somebody could be bold enough, even the Liberal Democrats, they're so half-hearted about it.
They're not. They just don't get the amplification that they probably deserve. They're not. No. You see, the problem you've got is the problem that we always stumble up against as soon as we introduce the B word to a conversation, is that the entire print media is dedicated to the lie.
Yes, that's true. But look, the Liberal Democrats, I shoved the envelopes through people's doors, you know, at election time. The Liberal Democrats sent out a survey to me. It was 4 pages long of all the things that they should be talking about. The word Brexit wasn't on it. I was so disappointed, I put it in the bin.
Yes, but there was nothing to be gained at that point, which brings me to the second part of my question. Apart from your vote, what would be gained by what would be gained by reminding people of the truth about A, Brexit itself, and B, the promises that were made by people like Farage? And I mean, Johnson's not in Parliament anymore, but you're not allowed to be a Tory MP unless you pretend that you think Brexit was a brilliant idea. Some of them are stupid enough to think it was a brilliant idea. Some of them are craven enough to pretend that they think it was a brilliant idea. And once you've got those two constituencies in place, there's literally nobody left.
Right. So, firstly, if the Conservatives owned up and came clean, sort of, dare I say, decent Tories, sort of the Rory Stewarts of this world, thinking Tories would return to the Conservative Party. So that would happen, and that would obviously help the country greatly to have a decent opposition. So that would happen. But getting back to that Liberal Democrats, by the way, that was about a month ago I received that survey from the Liberal Democrats. You know, and they're just so concentrated on local issues. But one party needs to step out because there's 48% plus votes out here which are going to go to that party, and that's an electoral success, I think, now, which it obviously wasn't 4 or 5 years ago.
They're not all going to go to that party. They're plenty. I mean, there might be rather more than people appreciate, but they're not. I think you're doing the thing that we all do sometimes, which is thinking that your personal position is reflected by everybody who shares one bit of your personal position. Do you see what I mean?
Okay. I do see what you mean, but here's the thing. You asked the question before, so why talk about it now?
Yeah.
It's a question that people need to be reminded, which they were never reminded of, because we voted for status quo, all right, with Remain. People need to be reminded what the benefits are of being in Europe. It's education. People need to know what it gave us. All those international companies that came to Britain to sell into the 500 million people market of the EU that have left this country, and all those factory units that have closed down.
Yeah, but you're relitigating a lost battle, and I appreciate that when the battle is to be fought again, all of these things will be important weapons wielded with skill and deftness by people like you. But in the context of the current Labour government, is it a good policy to point out how much, or even that many of our current problems are attributable to, simply put, a decade of low productivity, low growth, and therefore the high burden of taxation? Do you think people will buy it?
James, if you've got a flat tire on your car, you know, you have to admit, first of all, you've got a flat tire on your car before you can fix it, you know?
Yeah, you've never met a Brexiter, mate.
Yeah, but as long as we continue
they can inflate their tyres with sovereignty. I'm not even joking, actually. I know that is what I'm wondering, is whether or not that boneheaded constituency represented by people like Mark Francois and Jacob Rees-Mogg has been sufficiently hobbled to make reality our friend again. Because I look at Farage's standing in the polls, and I don't know whether people have completely forgotten his role in delivering the madness and nonsense that was Brexit, or whether they're doubling down on thinking, well, there is a good Brexit, it just goes to a different school, and if anybody can tempt it into the open, then it's creepy Uncle Nigel.
Yeah, but James, this is why your programme is so good, because without a discussion like this one today, without talking about it, all right, it gets forgotten about and a new history is written, all right?
And so what is the Daily Mail and the rest of them going to want to do? They're going to attack Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer for pointing out the thing that the Daily Mail told everyone was going to be brilliant has turned out to be awful.
Yeah.
So I still don't know. Thank you, Nick, for inviting me onto your programme. But the question of whether or not it will be politically successful is a horrible question. It's a question of our times. Of course it should be. Of course it should be. Should the truth matter? Of course it blooming should. But are we still so boiled by bent media, dishonest politicians, media figures who are happy to tell you on a Monday that you should vote for something on a Tuesday and then on Friday tell you need to stop talking about it now when you're asking for the results that you were promised? Does the truth matter? Does the truth matter? It's not the same question as should the truth matter. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:33. So many blasts from the past in my inbox that we should probably do an unhinged headline today. We haven't done one for a while. I've also got a missed information for you on a subject or a story that you may be aware of. And it's happening all the time. I don't know whether you've noticed this. People make a complaint to the police about someone. The police are obliged to investigate, and then they say there's nothing here. And there's kind of people, the kind of media figures that brought you Brexit, pretend that this is some sort of scandal or some example of freedom of speech being under threat. You want to change the law so that the police don't have to investigate complaints. You're going to create a very strange country. You know, I've also heard increasingly people saying, well, it doesn't matter if it's on Twitter, which is an extraordinary thing to say. Does it matter if it's graffitied on your front wall? Does it matter if I turn up outside your house with a loudhailer or outside your kid's school with a loudhailer and start shouting things about you that aren't true? Would that be something that you feel should be policed? I don't know. But the idea that when the police receive a complaint and they investigate it and conclude that they are not going to take any further action, then that's not a story. Except, of course, in Brexit Britain it is, because this narrative of persistent and constant victimhood is utterly engulfing, constantly telling people that they're victims. It's pathetic. The real irony is that they're the people who coined the word snowflake as an insult, as if it were people of a liberal disposition that were constantly whining and being victims. Oh, we're victims of this, we're victims of that, we're victims of Brussels, we're victims of immigrants, we've lost our freedom of speech, victim. Just grow up, seriously. Just grow up and start recognising the reality under your nose, which is what the Labour government is doing with regard to Brexit. And as a consequence of that, the professional victim mongers are, well, they're pleading victimhood again. Stop talking about Brexit, it's not fair. Stop it. But will it be politically successful for the government? Just because the numbers now are like huge in the opposite direction. Two things about that. They could swing back again with the full weight of a corrupt media, and it doesn't mean that everybody who is now persuaded it was a stupid thing to do cares enough about it to lend their support to a party that's pointing it out, or to acknowledge or accept that even though they think it was a bad idea, it is part of the problem that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are charged with unravelling. Why is Rachel from accounts a funny thing to say? Is it just because she's a woman and therefore she shouldn't be pontificating on matters fiscal? You should trust someone called Nigel instead, who hasn't even got a degree, I don't think. Is that all it is? It's just a sort of... Because I know that programme Colin from Accounts on Australian, that's quite funny. I quite like that. But why is Rachel from Accounts I mean, I don't know. It's right-wing media for you, isn't it? Anyway, I've got an unhinged headline for you. It's a doozy.
Unhinged headline.
Daniel Hannan. Remember him? Daily Mail have started paying Daniel Hannan for his opinions again. I just marvel, really, at what the world has become. The world's wrongest man. That's official. That's not an opinion, it's counting. He's got a title, he's got a little badge. At weekends he wears a little crown, walks around his house, well, he doesn't actually. He sends pictures out that were taken 10 years ago somewhere else and then claims that he's walking around his house. Look it up, that's quite a good joke. But anyway, this was in the Telegraph, but I presume it was online because they don't seem to be printing this stuff in the print edition anymore because they're trying to make my life harder. Here it is. Ready? Britain has given so much to civilization. Now the barbarians are inside. The poisonous ideas of Vladimir Lenin have infected our progressive elite.
Unhinged headline.
Well, now you know. Is it going to be a good idea? Is it time to get Brexit back out of the box? And will it work to the government's favour? Antonio is in Horsham. Antonio, what do you think?
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm not as privileged as the previous caller that got invited.
He didn't get invited. You're going to get me into trouble now. Everyone's going to think that some shows on some radio stations are so desperate for callers that I'm sure this has never happened on LBC, that they will phone up people who've texted in and beg them to appear on the programme. But the day that happens on this programme is the day, well, for a start, I can talk uninterrupted for an hour, Antonio, as you well know. But the day that happens on this programme is the day I hang up my headphones. No, everyone is invited. Come one, come all. Where were we?
I think it's time. Yes, I think it's time. Well, I don't think he's going to gain much because no one seems to like the guy. But I think it's time. Back then, if he had mentioned, I don't think he would have got any support because everyone was against the Brexit. But now it would be time at least to talk about it and to show to the youngsters and to the people who voted that Brexit was a good thing, to show them that it was the biggest mistake ever. I've been in this country 30 years. I just got on a plane, I looked for the different way of living, came here, got my job, got my national insurance number, worked, contributed for this society. I've actually lived here longer than my own country. None of that is possible anymore. No one can just get on a plane and come, because most Brits seem to think, and when I talk amongst friends, they say, well, there's no one to go and work in farms or work in factories. Well, get the foreigners, get the Europeans to come. Well, no one can get on a plane and come here and do that anymore like I did and many others. You don't get the national insurance number, so you cannot work and contribute for this society like I've done for 30 years. So in the same way... Well, and then you've got that's the microeconomics of it. The macroeconomics of it is, I mean, freedom of movement is a contributor to that, but it's got more to do with making it much harder to export the goods that we make, making it harder to import the goods that we want to sell, making it harder to do almost everything. Exactly. And that's a consequence of people who thought they were voting to cut red tape. The more you talk about it, the madder it becomes. Exactly. And you at the time, when you were asking what was positive about Brexit, and some callers were ringing you, and you asked a very simple question. I remember vividly. What can you do today that you could not do yesterday since Brexit? What has changed? What do you do now that you couldn't? And the guys went blah, 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 blah.
Everything, James. Loads of things.
Things have changed. Yes, for the worse. There is nothing positive about it. Nothing.
So, in the context of our economic problems, this sort of 30 billion, that seems to be the accepted figure that is missing from the public finances that she needs to find, that Rachel Reeves needs to find in the budget. Telling people that a large part of that, or a significant part of that, I don't think anyone could get away with claiming all of that. A significant part of that is a consequence of doing the mad thing that we voted for in 2016 and enacted in, I forget, is it 2020? But anyway, that do you think people? I'm going to say something terrible, Antonio. I worry sometimes. Apart from some happy corners of the media, I worry that social media has boiled so many brains. People just can't accept what's in front of them. You can say, the Chancellor can say it, the Health Secretary can say it, the Prime Minister can say it, but the massed ranks of mad media will combine to shout them down. They're already accusing Wes Streeting of doing something questionable or extraordinary when he does a bit of counting in public. Will people buy the idea that the reason why the current government has some of the economic problems it has is because of what they were opposed to, but was done anyway in 2016?
Exactly. I don't think people just don't blame it on that.
Do. No,
I don't think people
they do.
People don't blame on it. Never. They will never do. They'll think it was the greatest thing ever. But
I don't know. And there's the question. So you have to talk about it because it's a huge part of the national tapestry. It continues to affect people and will continue to do so for generations. Everybody knows the inevitability of some sort of return is clear, but is it? I don't know. I mean, have you ever met anyone who would say, poor old Rachel Reeves, she's got a right old problem, hasn't she, because of the way I voted in 2016. I don't know who this appeals to, except perhaps people who were already on the right side of the conversation. Nick in Wimborne was interesting. His vote's up for grabs. It's anyone's. You can have it if you want, if you promise to rejoin the single market. I don't know how many Nick in Wimbornes there are. I really don't. How many people are genuine? I mean, you have to buy it. But if you voted to remain, you already know it's true. And if you voted to leave, you're too ashamed to admit that you made... Well, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Who am I talking about? Am I talking about your dad? Am I talking about you? I might not publicly admit that they were gulled and misled and conned by Farage and Johnson and Rees-Mogg and the rest of them. But privately, they're looking at a chancellor charged with an incredibly difficult job at the moment, and they're going to admit, yeah, of course. The idea, for example, of putting Farage in charge of our economy, they've just abandoned the only fiscal manifesto pledge they made last time round. They're an absolute clown car of a party, but they're continuing to appeal to the people who think they can blame all their problems on foreigners. So on the one hand, you've got the party blaming everything on foreigners, despite the fact that they got you to do that thing in 2016 because they told you that foreigners were to blame for everything. And on the other hand, you've got a party saying that a lot of the problems that we've got are actually down to the thing we did in order to get rid of all the foreigners that the other party told you we needed to get rid of to make the country better. It's actually made the country measurably and considerably worse. Who is the mythical recipient of that message? 0345 6060 973. Who actually goes, oh yeah, of course. Of course Brexit is part of the reason why we've got such a big hole in our public finances. Can't believe I didn't realise it before Wes Streeting said it at the Clifton Literary Festival yesterday. I just don't know that person exists. Maybe I live in a bubble. Where is the person that needs Wes Streeting or Keir Starmer to tell them that a large part of the £30 billion hole in our public finances is down to Brexit? If you're educated, informed and honest, you already know it. And if you're not, is that little nugget of information from those politicians really going to tear the scales from your eyes and deliver you, signed, sealed and delivered, to the land of reality, where Brexit is, was and always will be the stupidest of stupid ideas?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:48, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There are only 3 people who have the magic number, the golden telephone, which means that they can come on this programme whenever they want. Such is my admiration for the work that they do and the place that they hold in both mine and the public affections. Do you know who they are? Taylor Swift, Jamie Oliver and Martin Lewis. Sadly, only 2 of them have ever taken up the invitation, and I'm not sure Taylor Swift has the first idea who we are. But Martin Lewis is here because, once again, he's identified something that speaks directly to natural justice and involves some of the most vulnerable people in society, Martin.
Yeah, I was going to try and say I could put you in touch with Taylor Swift, but it's never going to happen. Yeah, look, so this is part of my charity, the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute charity. We're launching a campaign today because so many people are forced to share their PINs and they're leaving themselves open to fraud. So 1 in 5 people with mental health problems are sharing their PIN number, which means they're shedding the cloak of normal financial protections in desperation and are potentially losing money and victims to financial abuse. And 2 in 5 people want help. Now, so what's this all about? What's the solution? Well, we went through and looked at what the main street banks offer and why people are doing this. And there are 3 main things that you want if you've got a mental health problem to be able to have access to. The first is a carer's card, where you can give someone limited access to go and spend on your account with controls on it. Only 7 in 18 mainstream banks offer that. The next is third-party notifications. So an example of this, and we had an amazing case study on this from our lived experience panel, who had severe bipolar to the extent that she'd been hospitalised due to it and had manic spending sprees. And she gave someone her PIN because she was so worried about it. But actually what she wanted was to have a trusted friend or family member who she could nominate to get notifications if she had unusual spending patterns on her account. You know how you get them when you go abroad and it says, we think you're abroad. So they have the tech to do it, but just notifications so that a family member could come and say, hey, is everything okay? 3 in 18 major banks offer that only. Wow. And then the final one, which is partial access, third-party access, where people might be able to set spending limits or limit your spending on certain amounts. Again, only 1 in 18 do this. Now, what we have to remember is many people who have mental health conditions which are transitory are when they are well, they want to protect themselves from themselves when they're ill. People want to be responsible for their own money, but if you're struggling with mental health issues, they know there are times they can't be responsible. So the responsible thing for them to do at those times is to get a trusted family member or friend to help. But the systems aren't in place allowing them to do it legally, so they do it illegally. And if you do it illegally, i.e. you give someone your PIN number, it's not illegal, you're not breaking the law, but you're breaking the terms and conditions, you're no longer protected by all the usual rules of finance. So we're trying to square the circle. And what we're asking today, and the good news is, we've spoken to some banks and they're warm, and we've spoken to the government and they're warm before launching the campaign today, is that we want a voluntary agreement between the government and the banks that says, as bare minimum standards, all major banking providers should offer carers cards, third-party account notifications, third-party payment controls. And there is precedent for these voluntary agreements. One was done with basic bank accounts before.
Why wouldn't they?
Because they haven't.
That's it. So it is. So there's no particular reason for resistance except that we've never needed to do it before, and it will cost a few quid to send out the literature or something.
You know how the system works, James.
Not as well as you, Martin.
Well, no. I was going to say that the difference between us, we're both journalists, but I do campaigning work and go in and meet people. You would be amazed that some of the most difficult things to get done are the one that everybody agrees with, because everybody else thinks it's somebody else's job. Financial education in schools was like that. 96% support, so everyone thought, yeah, it should happen. And I was banging my head going, yeah, it should happen, but it's not happening. Gosh. And still, even now, we first did that in 2014, even now, I've just met the person, I met a few months ago, the person doing the curriculum review. We're hoping to get it on the compulsory part of the curriculum. Everybody, or almost everybody, agrees with it. Makes it tough. This is a no-brainer. So everyone's going, yes, but we don't do it for these reasons. And so it's all about, you're sort of having to coerce people into doing something everybody agrees with, because it's so obvious that they should be doing it, that bizarrely that means nobody gets the oomph to ever go and do it.
So how
Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes absolutely perfect sense. When you say it out loud, I would never have worked it out for myself. But how do you mobilise the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute army then? Who can bring and how do we bring pressure to bear?
I come on programmes like yours and I talk about it to widen it. And if I may say that anybody out there who has money and mental health problems, or maybe their partner has, we have an amazing lived research community of 5,000 people, and all our policies go through them before. So I have these brilliantly clever policy wonk people who work for the charity. We're about 20 full-time staff, some great economists. They come up with clever policies, but sometimes clever people coming up with clever policies aren't grounded in reality. So everything has to go through our 5,000 panel lived experience group first. We specially underindex young men under 35 from ethnic minorities. We underindex on you. If you're listening, you've got money and mental health problems, please go to the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute website and join our advisory panel. So we mobilise that. I go in and meet ministers. The team do lots of amazing, detailed, proper 40-page long policy papers on how we do this, and we start to coalesce opinion so that we make it socially unacceptable for banks and lenders not to do this.
And finally, Martin, to clarify, you've expressed the importance of helping people to help themselves, or to protect themselves from the ill version of themselves.
Yes.
What about the more traditional abuses, when it is somebody else taking advantage of this system? You have stories, I think, about people who've been robbed blind, effectively, without the protections that you would normally have.
Yeah, I had someone, this is a quote from a member of our panel who wants to remain anonymous, and of course we'll respect that. I was mentally unwell, had someone I thought I trusted trying to help. Instead, I was coerced into giving them thousands of pounds thinking they were helping me. Now, let's be blunt. We are not going to stop that in its entirety. You can't stop financial abuse. You can't stop trusted loved ones. But if you're doing it outside of the rules of the financial sector, so that you have therefore done something that breaches their rules, such as giving somebody else your PIN so that they can go and spend on your card in a way that is not allowed, you have far less protections and recourse than if they're doing it on a carer's card where you set up pre-notifications and it has to be done and there are rules and regulations. So this is all about, it's never going to stop someone you love breaching the rules and trusting you. Thankfully, it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. But what it will do, it means there are more protections and guidelines in place to try and help people. And also, you're able to go on. You just think about it. In that case, You could say, I don't want this person to be able to spend more than £100 a week. And you go on your carer's card, you put that in, and that's what they can spend. But if you give them your card, they can spend what they like. It's those friction-based policy changes that we would like.
Brilliant stuff. I think the phrase national treasure is appearing in my inbox considerably more often than it ever usually does, Martin, and I second that. Moneyandmentalhealth.org if people want to find out more about this or indeed avail themselves of the help that your charity offers.
I'm not sure that's technically right. Let me just double check.
Go on then.
I think that's another organisation that does to consumer and we're policy. I'm just checking my computer.
This is live radio, ladies and gentlemen.
Live radio.
To confirm.
I'm wrong. I say that with pride. I'm delighted to be wrong. Moneyandmentalhealth.org is our website. I'm only the founder and chair. How am I expected to know?
On that bombshell. Martin Lewis, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. And of course, the work that they're doing is of paramount importance, a bit beyond and without the current campaign to address this question of safe cards for people. I mean it. Seriously, him, Jamie and Taylor Swift. If anyone knows Taylor Swift, will you tell her that she's in that august company and that the door is always open on this programme for her to make an appearance. Back to Brexit, or is it? You see what I did there? Shane's in Preston. Shane, what would you like to say?
Hi, it's still morning. Good morning, James.
Hey, Shane.
I think Wes Streeting making that comment is probably not a good idea. And if Labour are going to use this as a tactful decision to try and explain away why they're needing to raise taxes, it's not going to go down very well.
But what if it's true?
I don't dispute the fact that it's true or not. I think fundamentally, Brexit is a polarising issue. It's still a polarising issue. And what you're saying effectively is that, half the population, almost half the population, are to blame for this black hole, and Labour's really
if they do it cleverly, you do compassion for the contempt for the con men, don't you? You say, completely understand how people could have voted for it precisely because of the lies and the easy sloganeering that was indulged in by people like Farage and Rees-Mogg Johnson. Yeah, I mean, I've tried that for the best part of 10 years now. It's not entirely unsuccessful to distinguish between the snake oil salesmen and their victims. If they get that right, then some of your concerns might be mitigated.
I don't disagree. However, I think that they lack in popularity at the moment. So it would look to me more like
this is the politics.
Someone else to blame.
Yeah, this is the politics of it. I mean, this is what worries me. So does the truth matter? Is not the same question as should the truth matter. Of course the truth should matter. But if your main electoral foe is one of the main salesmen of the snake oil, I mean, you've got to roll the dice and at least try to make it stick. Try and make him take responsibility for what he's done to the country.
Unfortunately, we're in that position where we up that creek without a paddle. And, if you were to say to me now, who do I vote for? I'd have to say to you, I really don't know.
When would it not be polarised? When would you accept that it's not? Because the numbers are pretty stark now. And the idea of somebody still thinking that it was a good idea economically it's hard to imagine anybody being in that category. You might have people who say, well, I took calls at the time from people who say, I don't care if I'm poorer as long as we get rid of all the foreigners. I mean, if you confine it to economics and you confine it to the snake oil salesman, it might just work.
I mean, people have got to run the narrative, and no one is going to talk about the narrative of how bad Brexit has been for individuals or for the economy, because the rags aren't publishing that information.
No, I mean, that is the problem. And I don't know whether they can find a way to bypass that with a really strong social media game, or whether they can take the fight to the rags. But as long as you have the people that advertised the snake oil, the people who sold the snake oil, the people that wrote countless articles and front pages pretending that the snake oil was the elixir of youth to cure all ills, then I'm afraid Shane's got a point, is that you wonder what it will actually achieve, except just mollify people who are on pretty much the same side of history, but have been feeling rather let down by the failure of the current government, and particularly its leaders, to acknowledge the simple reality of what Brexit has done to our economy. So I'm chalking that one up as I don't know, all right? I'm allowing myself a moment of uncertainty.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is is 4 minutes after 12. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the subject we talk about next has become one of my favourites in recent years. I suppose that's really when we reach the end of our time together, isn't it? When we no longer find things to talk about that are new. I don't think we'd come across this until about 2 years ago, maybe only 1 year ago. In fact, it may have been this case that drew it to our attention in the first place. And there are two elements to this. One will be personal experience. I've been surprised on the 2 occasions that we've discussed this in the past by how many people it is relevant to. And the second is what we actually think about the practice, the legality, the principle, or even the morality of it. There is a 14-year-old boy in Ghana at the moment who was taken there by deception. He didn't particularly want to, well, he certainly didn't want to stay there. He went there believing that he was visiting a sick relative. And when he got there, he discovered that he'd actually been enrolled in a private boarding school, where I'm told, and again, this is something where I may need your help, I'm told that the levels of discipline and strictness will be much higher than you might find in British schools, British state schools, and these days, since they stopped beating us, British boarding schools. Oh, Lord, speaking of beating, I saw a film yesterday, and I really recommend it, but it's called I Swear, and it's about a man with Tourette syndrome growing up, and there's a couple of scenes in it where he gets beaten by the headmaster at his school for doing things that were a consequence, 100% a consequence of his Tourette syndrome. And oh man, anyway, it's a brilliant film, and it's a lot more uplifting than I've made it sound. But if you get the chance to see it, then do. Superlative central performances. But I don't know whether they've still got corporal punishment at boarding schools in Ghana, but if they have, it may be one of the things that sways your answer or informs your answer to some of the things that I am about to ask you. So, his parents felt that negative influences had pushed him towards criminal behaviours. They found a kitchen knife hidden, and I think this matters, although I don't know, does this matter? So the more detail I give you on why the conversation is unfolding in the way that it is, the more detail I give you on why the parents took this decision, then the more alive the question of whether or not they should have been able to do this or not becomes. Because if they found a kitchen knife hidden behind their living room window that they thought he'd put there to keep it in the garden so that they wouldn't find it in the house, does that change the question of whether or not they have the right to transport him to Ghana against his will and essentially leave him there? They found imagery of knives on his phone. Teachers warned them that they thought he was at risk of criminal exploitation. Sounds a bit county lines, doesn't it? The boy denied this and is desperate to return to the UK. A social worker, I think appearing for the boy, said if he was allowed back home, the mother would be extremely vigilant for any behaviour that showed he was placing himself at risk. She is very clear that he is better, safer and alive if he is in Ghana. I would not want him to go into care in the UK. The two better options are his parents or staying where he is. I don't know what the judge is doing in this case. I don't know what the challenges are, legally speaking, because either you are entitled to put your child wherever you want to put them, even if it is against their will, or you are not. I remember lads running away from my boarding school, and they always got brought back. A bit like the Mounties, some of those monks. They never, ever got far, and they always got brought back. And I'm not making light of the trauma that those boys must have been going through to prompt them to sort of, pack up their troubles in an old kit bag and hit the road. But if I had wanted to leave, I would have told my parents. Oh, I don't know, actually. So if I'd wanted to leave boarding school in Yorkshire, not in Ghana, I grant you, but it was pretty isolated, especially if you didn't have any money for taxis. If I'd wanted to leave boarding school in Yorkshire and my parents didn't want me to, whose will should prevail? I actually don't know the answer to that question. Is it legal, moral? Personal to you? And if the reason why my parents wanted me there wasn't simply because they thought I was going to get a better education than I would anywhere else, But it was genuinely because they thought that they were keeping me out of trouble, or in the case of this boy's mother, keeping him alive. She fears her son may be killed if he returns. Then does the question actually change? It's an extraordinary legal saga. I'm intrigued to know how the lawyers got involved and what kind of money is on the table here, but that's just me being curious. British-born teenager challenged the decision in June to leave him in Ghana. 3 Court of Appeal judges have now said that confusion is evident and ordered that the case be reheard. And that rehearing of the case is expected to conclude tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll find out what actually happens. So I of a generation, I'm 53 years. Am I 53 years? Yeah, I'm 53 years old. And I'm of a generation that has really witnessed a huge amount of change when it comes to parental authority. I was raised in an era of because I say so, and that would come from parents and from teachers. You didn't really have much room for autonomy, particularly at very strict boarding schools, which I was at, where I did indeed, at the one when I was younger, from the age of about 10 to 13, I was beaten quite regularly, and nobody even questioned it. So I certainly don't subscribe to the everything was better in the olden days school of thought. And I'm not one of those people who think children have too much freedom these days or have too much autonomy. But I do think that they're human beings. And I do wonder whether there is a denial of some form of humanity here if a child desperately doesn't want to be in Ghana, at boarding school in Ghana, a million miles away from everything they've ever known. So there are 2 ways into this. The first is, would you do it? Because that's going to be the evidence for the prosecution and the defence. It happened to you and it worked, or it happened to you and it was absolutely bloody awful. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And the second question for the rest of us, and this is going to be really interesting. Let's do it like a philosophy seminar or a law seminar, and look at the question of whether or not, and I got into trouble at boarding school, as Robin has just very kindly pointed out. So it's not necessarily a guarantee of a life on the straight and narrow. It's highly unlikely I would have come to the attention of Humberside Drug Squad if I'd still been at school in Kidderminster. But that's a story for another day. On a purely moral, philosophical or legal level, who decides where a 14-year-old sleeps? Who decides where a 14-year-old goes to school? How much say should the 14-year-old have in that moment? So the reason I mention my age and my generation is that I think when I was young, the feeling would very much be, do as you're told, because I say so. There would have been no room at all for, well, okay, if you're not comfortable with that. And I stress, despite my age, I'm not one of those stick in the muds who thinks that all progress is bad and that all change is a negative. I want you to tell me what you think the rights of the boy in this case should be. That's the specifics of it, all right? That's the absolute specifics of it, the pure intellectual question. Who should decide whether this boy stays at boarding school in Ghana? The boy or the parents? Obviously, there is no obvious answer to that question because it's actually going to be a judge. But if you had to explain to me why the boy should make the decision, whether you're drawing on personal experience or not, or the parents should make the decision, what would you say? Okay, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And then the question of why this happens, how feasible is it that removing a boy from London to Africa is actually, this is where I suppose my naivety and my privilege kick in, you would actually keep them from a life of potential crime. So I want to know whether you have done this, whether someone in your family has done this, whether it was done to you. I really want you to call me on 0345 6060 973, but I don't want to confine the conversation to people with skin in the game, with people with a personal experience of it, because look, I'll be completely honest with you, I don't know what my opinion on this is. Am I saying that too much at the moment? There are days when I'd have a pungent opinion on every subject under the sun, feel like they're a long distance in the rearview mirror. Why would I? Who should choose? All right, I'm going to make a decision before we go to the break. And then you can tell me, you can add to your list of questions the question of whether or not you think I'm right or wrong. You can't do it, can you? So I'm imagining being the parent of a 14-year-old boy in trouble, and I'm conscious of the fact that I can't keep him out of trouble. However hard I try, there's no guarantees that you can keep a 14-year-old boy out of trouble, and I'm convinced that he's going to end up in quite serious trouble. Therefore, I'm taking up the opportunity to send him to Ghana, to boarding school, where he will be measurably and demonstrably safer. QED, end of, full stop, next paragraph. And then I'm the 14-year-old boy. And I don't want to be in Ghana. I want to be at home with my mum and my mates. All right, my mum doesn't want me at home at the moment because she thinks I'm safer here, but I want... And you give me quite a lot of responsibility when you're 14. You expect me to grow. Who's it going to be? Parents or boy? Mum and dad or child? And crucially, why? Why? It's 12:15.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:16 is the time. I mean, does it work? I find one person who says it worked. I was saved from a life of crime by being sent to boarding school in Africa or you know, Switzerland or anywhere miles away from home. And then someone will say, no, it didn't work. I've never forgiven my parents. See, it's tricky, right? That's why we got judges. Musa is in Brentford. Musa, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James. How are you doing? You okay?
I'm all good. What's your story?
Well, I was 13 and I got sent back to Kenya. My mum told me that I was going to Dubai, but then we ended up landing in Kenya.
Oh, wow. So you thought you were going on holiday?
I thought I was going on holiday to Dubai.
Was there not a bit of a clue when the pilot announced what the destination was?
Not at all. I wasn't thinking about it. I was just happy I was
You
going
had
on
your
holiday.
headphones on, didn't you?
100% on my iPad. I was going to go. So
God, what did you think when you landed in Kenya?
I just looked around and I said, yeah, this doesn't look like Dubai at all. And they took me to a village first where I got to meet the elder. She said, you need to learn how to live. You're living freely. You're taking everything for granted that you have in London. So we're going to send you back there and we're going to come back for you in about a year or two. You're going to stay with your auntie.
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't happy about that, obviously. So then once they left, my auntie got me into a boarding school. And I was there for about 6 months, the first one. And I didn't know about caning, so they cane kids in school.
Right.
So
how old are you now, just to get a bit of perspective on the time scale?
I'm 30 now.
So this is just under 20 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and what were you doing at home that made your mum worry, particularly?
She thought that I was hanging around with the wrong crowd, coming home late, and she didn't want me to go through the path of my older cousin who was in and out of prison.
Ah, okay. So that's relevant, isn't it? So she had grounds for fear.
She had grounds for fear, but I should have had a say in it whether I wanted to stay in Kenya or not.
Yeah, it does feel that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. But at the end of the day, I look back on it now, and I do think that she done the right thing.
Oh,
because
boy.
most of my friends growing up all ended up in prison. So I do feel like she done the right thing at the same time.
And well, you're no use to me. I'm trying to find a strong opinion on this. No, you just giving me both. What have you told your mum that you is she still with us? Have you told her that you think she did the right thing?
No.
Why don't you do that?
I think I should.
I think you should do that tonight.
I will do that right after this call.
Is she in Brentford as well?
No, she lives in Shepherd's Bush.
Okay, because there's that lovely new Italian restaurant just opposite Greg's. Have you been there yet? Rotora. Take her somewhere fancy like that and give her a big thank you.
I will do.
Stay safe, Lisa. 90 minutes after 12 is the time. Well, there you go. That's no use to anybody, is it? It happened to me and I was outraged by it. But looking back now from the age of 30, I think it was probably the right thing to do. Caleb's in Braintree. Caleb, what do you think?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Long time listener, first time caller.
Welcome.
Thank you. So, just a little bit of a background. So, I was born and raised in Ghana, and I went to boarding school in Ghana as well. So, I've seen both sides. So, I've seen people who've come in at that age, 13, 14, when we went to boarding school from the UK because, they were mixing with the wrong crowd. And then they've come in and they tend to appreciate life more because they have a lot more, they tend to understand that they had a lot more available to them in the UK or the US, wherever they came from. As compared
so you'd be there permanently, as it were, and then these boys would fly in sometimes against their will, like Musa. They've effectively been kidnapped by their own parents and dropped off at the school that for you was normal, but for them was spectacularly stricter than anything they'd encountered before.
Yes, absolutely. But they come in, and I think there is a bit of resistance at first, but then they just, they make friends with, obviously, us, the locals, and they just get used to, living life there. But I've seen, two different perspectives where I've seen people who've come in and turned their life around completely, and then travelled back to the UK after school and become totally different people. But I also know a case of one boy who was from Croydon, came to school, looked like he turned his life around. After school, his parents brought him back to Croydon. A year later, he was back with the gang again and got stabbed.
Oh, no.
So, yeah. But I think to answer your question, I think at that age, 13, 14, I think it should be the parents' decision.
Even in a case like this, where he's so determined to come back that months later he's phoning up lawyers, appealing to court. I mean, there comes a point where you could possibly have your cake and eat it. You could say, yes, of course it should be the parents' decision, and they should be allowed to make the decision.
Yes.
But boys left my boarding school because they couldn't bear it. You know, I mean, that the idea that he wants to come back because he can't bear it, that's when it moves into trickier territory, where it becomes close to cruelty to insist that you stay.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
I absolutely agree with you on that. And I think that should have probably been discussed within the wider family and came to a resolution before it got to, the courts and stuff like that. So I don't know what happened.
No, this is going to be... No, I'm not going to trust anyone who's got a 100% answer to this question now. I thought that's what I wanted, but in the specific case of this boy, everybody's right in that the parents should be free to make that decision at that age. But if it goes really bad, if he absolutely hates it, how long does he have to endure it for before they accept that he needs to come home?
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I don't know about his school, but I had a great time in my school, so I don't know what he hates about that school.
No, I hear you. And was there corporal punishment, Caleb?
No, just sort of like... we call it bullying between the seniors and...
right, yeah, that's not nice, but it's not. It's because it does depend. These are all variables that matter to me, at least, because if it is commonplace, I don't know that it is. Our earlier caller, Musa, was talking about something that happened over 15 years ago. But getting beaten is horrible and profoundly wrong, whether it's been done by a parent, which is in the news today for other reasons, or a teacher, which is... in my view, even worse. It would be a form of trafficking. You're sending someone to be treated in a way that would be illegal here. And as No Hostages points out in a message to Blue Sky, they're profiting from it as well. Isn't that just trafficking? You don't prevent crime by traumatising kids. Trauma increases the risk of negative life outcomes. So, very popular in this country at the moment to pretend that we know better than judges. It's been a tabloid trope for years, but as with all tabloid tropes that have their roots in prejudice and ignorance, it seems to be becoming more, not less popular with every passing month. And this is why it needs a judge, isn't it? This is why it needs a judge. Well, I think it is, until you tell me otherwise, because you need to establish whether or not there is trauma, for example. And if there's trauma, then the answer to the question of should he stay there is going to be different from if, like Caleb, he's loving every minute of it. Kerry's in Lambeth. Kerry, what do you think?
Hi, morning, afternoon. Sorry, I think, like you said, it's a 50-50 here, really, because I personally haven't experienced what we're discussing here today, but I have family members who've been sent away, and I also have friends who've been sent away. And in every example, it works, because I think what we've come to find being of it...
Well, it's not 50-50 then, is it?
Well, 100% then, sorry. I mean, in terms of how it's done and the parents doing what they're doing, I'm 50-50 because... for example, the ones that have been sent away, they've come back and they've changed. And something's happened where, in terms of the education, they've got up playing their social good. I think for myself, being born in England, I was born here, I feel as though sometimes as children we're given rights before we need them. We have sometimes we're a bit too opinionated. Like, where would he know to appeal now as a 14-year-old to get the judge involved in, for example, where sometimes the rights are taken away from the parents. But I think from what I have seen and experienced, it's always been a good thing.
So it's quite commonplace. I mean, you've got a few people in your circle to whom this has happened. Or,
So my cousin, for example, she was like my first cousin, so she was going off the rails, police every 5 minutes. Because what I come to find is that when we're kind of brought to the West, we kind of mock the legal system. We already know what's going to happen. Like, I've got people that say, "Oh, NFA, no further action." They have these acronyms because they already know the legal system and what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, and all the rest of it. So they laugh at the justice system. Whereas in Africa, for example, you don't play with the police. We have people who commit crimes, but very rarely do they go ahead and commit the same crime because they learned the first time. So I think what's happened within the UK, and I always say to people, England is an amazing country. It's the land of opportunities. I love it here. I wouldn't go anywhere else. But I do feel as though something's happened where children have become adults now, and adults are being kind of told,
I know my rights. I know my rights. So that could be perceived as a good thing. You're describing a country where they have no rights, really, in the face of the law.
I'm perplexed. I'm sometimes surprised at how much these children know the legal system in and out. To some degree, it's like, well, why don't you know a subject, for example? So we've now concerned ourselves with things like this. So we should be really concerned about community centres that these kids don't have.
No, you're covering a lot of ground. I agree with pretty much everything you said. What about your cousin, if you don't mind me asking? Did it have a transformative effect on her?
Absolutely, where she actually thanked her parents. So she's like, I didn't realise how off the rails I was until I went back home. And my behaviour was obviously disgusted in the family back home. And then when she came in and people would speak to her, and then at the time our grandma was still alive, so my grandma had a hand in kind of getting her back onto the right track. And it wasn't abuse where she was beaten or anything like that.
No, I think that's important. I shouldn't have glossed over that earlier, because if there is if there is any beating, any physical abuse whatsoever, that puts the parents, for me at least, that puts the parents now in the wrong, albeit that my own parents, when they sent me to a school where we got beaten, they didn't think they were doing anything wrong, and I didn't think they were doing anything wrong. But the world has turned, hasn't it? If you're living in a country where it's illegal, to send someone to a country where it isn't and where it happens is a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. And and your cousin is now living.
She's a mother herself, and finally she actually goes back home often, where she wants her child to actually kind of have the morals and the principles that she was kind of given. Because, like I said, England isn't a brilliant country, but we are in a mess. We're in a mess where now the children, they tell us what to do. You know, like, we're scared to get involved or to do anything with these kids because we fear them, and that's not the way it should be.
Well, there shouldn't be any fear at all. I mean, in my glorious rule, in my utopian universe, you're describing the pendulum swinging too far, really, from the days when you could get beaten, as I was watching last night, a true life story of a young man who had Tourette's syndrome and will get beaten because of the consequences of that, to a world where some adults you think are frightened of children, which is not something that you'd want at all. And if your child was in that world and you could see no other way of getting them out of it but transporting them to the other, to another country thousands of miles away, who could really look you in the eye and tell you were doing wrong? Okay, bring him back and let him rejoin a gang, which is why it needs a judge, perhaps, actually, and not a philosopher or a moralist. Is there a golden rule here? 14-year-old, because what's ridiculous about this is that there will be 1 second where it goes from being his parents' decision to being his. I say it's ridiculous. It's relatively arbitrary, Like, as with all ages of consent. 1 second before midnight, you'd be breaking the law. 1 second after midnight, you wouldn't. And that is very much this case as well. That's the only system we've got. And some people are a lot more mature than other people, even though they've got the same number of miles on the clock. But who gets to decide? When the boy says, I want to come home, and the parents say, you can't, I suppose what we are saying is, who should the judge side with? The boy or the parents? And that brings us back to the original question, doesn't it? Which is the moral, philosophical or legal jeopardy of choosing who has agency over that 14-year-old boy's body. The 14-year-old boy or the mother and father. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:33. I think I've got a missed information for you. We haven't done one of these for a while, but this is speaking to something that I'm noticing popping up with increasing frequency.
Missed information.
Thank you, Emily. So here's the headline. I was born and bred here and told it's a hate crime to say so. So what I want you to do now is to call me a blancmange. Could you call me a blancmange? I'm going to report you for a hate crime. And then I'm going to go to the newspapers and say that I've been told it's a... No, hang on. No, you then go to the newspapers and say that you've been told it's a hate crime to call James O'Brien a blancmange. At what point does that become newsworthy? Well, if you get charged or arrested or you get your collar felt, if it goes anywhere beyond responding to the initial complaint. So this is a counsellor who has gone to the media with her whining victimhood about freedom of speech because she said to an interviewer, I was born and bred here, and then discovered that a 22-page dossier outlining alleged breaches had been submitted to Police Scotland and the Ethical Standards Commissioner for Scotland. So, two thoughts on this. The first is, how on earth do you string out a complaint about someone simply saying I was born and bred here into a 22-page dossier? I wonder, am I the only person whose brain works like this? If a complaint has been submitted about you, an obviously spurious and ridiculous complaint that nobody sensible would think would be taken beyond initial investigation in a billion years, then how does it end up being a 22-page dossier? Yeah, precisely. And then you get all the media brouhaha, lots of people wanging on about freedom of speech, pretending something serious has happened, and then you get to the actual quote from the police. Are you ready for this? We received a complaint. I'm going to do it in the voice of a central casting police officer across whose desk this kind of thing comes. Okay, presumably a little bit bored of irresponsible journalists and politicians trying to turn it into something that it categorically isn't. Are you ready? We received a complaint, inquiries were carried out, and no criminality has been established. That's the end of the story. So, a politician claims that they have been reported for using a phrase, when in fact there's a 22-page dossier, containing precisely no grounds for further investigation, which ends with the police saying, we received a complaint, inquiries were carried out, and no criminality has been established. And that is literally the end of the story. So how on earth that ends up, I was born and bred here, in the Daily Mail, and told it's a hate crime to say so? I don't know. Unless, of course, you think that it would be newsworthy if you called me a blancmange and I reported you and the police looked at the case and decided there was no case to answer, and you then went to the newspapers and said, I called James O'Brien a blancmange and I was told it's a hate crime to say so. And that is why you need to pay attention. Or you need to tune into
Missed Information
whenever we actually remember to do it. Chris is in Woodford to steer us back to the rights of a 14-year-old boy. Who controls his bodily geography, him or his parents, Chris?
Hi, James. Well, I'm 100% sure that it has to be the parents. Because, I mean, there's a reason why, you can't be an adult till you're 18. And before then, I think parents have the right to decide where you have your education, what kind of education you have. I've had a personal experience. So I was born and bred in Ghana. I moved to the UK when I was 22. I'm in my 60s now. I took my daughter back to Ghana. She went to school in Ghana, came back to the UK, went to university here. She's got 2 law degrees. She works in finance now. Now, where we used to live before where we do now, all of her friends there, or most of her friends there, are single parents. Some have ended up in prison. And I think if you ask her, she will tell you we did her good by sending her back home. I think where I have a problem...
Yeah, but what if she hated it?
She didn't.
No, I know, but that's not... You're never going to end up in court, are you? What if she absolutely hated it? Hated every minute of it?
Well, I tell you what, I think
she's crying herself to sleep every single night, howling at the moon, begging you to bring her home after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months.
So, James, yes. I think it's the way the parents approached it. Because with my kids, from when they were very young, we used to go back.
Are you on a motorway gantry at the moment?
No, I'm not. I just gone for my daily walk.
Okay.
So I'm sat at the bus stop now. It's just cars passing by.
Well, you're not a very good advertisement for Woodford if the most pleasant walk you can go on is around the middle of a motorway by the sounds of it.
No, it's not.
Oh, God, you're going to have to hurry up because it's driving me nuts.
Well, so basically what I'm saying is I think parents have the right to do what they have to do. Maybe it's just the way they went around it. There must be a bit of a culture shock, and that's why this child is crying to come back home. But if it was done the right way...
I disagree. And now I'm back to my own school, because I'm now remembering, more lads than I thought at the time who just hated it, absolutely hated it. And I think one lasted a term, I remember, in the year below me, and he just hated it. Hated being away from home, hated being away from his mum, I think, and it was his dad that wanted him to go to the school because his dad had gone there himself. And it can be a brutal environment, a boarding school. I don't know what has changed in the intervening years or what is different between the UK and Ghana, but your daughter liked it. That's the problem. And you can say the parents could have done a better job, and you might be right, but they didn't. So you're addressing the scenario as it stands. As it stands. Should this boy be brought home? He hates it. He doesn't want to be there, and his parents want him to be there. And he is potentially traumatised by it. And if the regime is very, very strict, then the trauma might be physical as well as emotional. I don't know. Abigail's in Colchester. Abigail, what would you like to say?
Hiya. I went to boarding school for 2.5 years.
Did you want to go?
So I didn't actually know I was going. We went for Christmas and they kept us there and said, you're not coming back. So I was with my younger brother, which was fine. And I guess one of their rules in a boarding school is that siblings are not supposed to be in the same, hostel.
Right.
So they broke that rule because my brother was quite young.
Oh. How young was he?
He's 3 years younger than me, so I was 12. He would have been 9.
God, so cool.
So they kind of, but it wasn't like the same hostel. Obviously, boys and girls were separate, but it was more like we were close as opposed to...
so he could have a little bit of family feeling. Exactly. What did you feel? Was it your mum or your dad who made
it was my dad. So my dad was a single parent. He felt like he wasn't coping. There's actually 4 of us, so 2 of us went and the older 2 stayed.
Whoa. Where was it? Where was it? Did you tell me? Sorry.
It was in Nigeria. So we went to Nigeria, And then
so you're there for Christmas with the family?
Yeah.
And then what day was it? Boxing Day? New Year's Eve? When did he drop the bombshell?
It was literally just as New Year's was coming up.
So he said, Abigail, come and sit down, bring your little brother.
Yeah.
I've got some good news and some bad news.
So you're staying.
You're not coming home.
No, literally.
What's the good news?
I know, right?
And how was it, honestly? How was it?
Genuinely speaking, I think it did change my life. It changed my perspective. We didn't have any kind of beating or anything like that.
Good.
We were born and raised in the UK. So, we have a kind of way that we were raised. And I remember there was an instance where they wanted to actually cane us for something. And I actually spoke up and I said, I'm so sorry, but that's not how I was raised and that's not where I'm coming from. So they gave me that pass. I was never going to get
that wouldn't
paid.
have gone down well with... But if that was my school, that would not have gone down very well. Well, you're getting a free pass. I'm getting battered on a weekly basis.
My brother had an instance where they wanted to cane him and he didn't know how to speak up for himself. So they did actually cane him and I literally came down on them like a ton of bricks and it literally never happened again.
This is very... Ty, your call in with the last call, he thought that children had too much agency and too much autonomy. And I think my pendulum's swinging very strongly towards your position, which is that you speak up for yourself and you stick up for your rights. But to be clear, your dad wasn't worried about you and your brother. Your dad just couldn't cope with all... I mean, you weren't getting into trouble or criminality or anything like that.
No, we were literally raised in a very small village in Colchester. There was no, crime or anything where we were, I literally still see the kids playing outside now. So there was nothing about crime or anything. And to be fair, I'm even shocked that they didn't send the older 2 instead of the younger 2.
Yes.
But maybe they were easier to manage because of their age.
Maybe.
So maybe,
how old were you when you came back?
So I came back when I was that year.
So your phone line went down then. How long did you stay there for?
I was there for 2.5 years.
Oh, wow. And your brother the same?
Yeah.
And what was the decision to bring you back based on? Do you know?
I think it was because my oldest brother said about GCSEs that we should come back in. I should come back in time to do my GCSEs in the UK.
Right.
So that's what my dad said. Yeah, that makes sense actually. So that's why we came back.
Final question, I promise, because I'm being really nosy. Did you come home for holidays, or did you stay there for the 2.5 years solid?
We stayed there. So we only came out once in the 2 years.
Well, you don't sound very traumatised.
No, to be fair, I made quite a lot of long-term friends. It was quite an experience. there was a couple of things like the rigid, like routines, waking up, going to sleep, not having TVs and PlayStation, things like that we missed out on. But to be honest, like it was kind of like a big sleepover.
That's a boarding school thing, not a Nigerian thing. That would be the same at my old school. But of course, the question changes if your little brother, for example, had been absolutely hating every single minute of it. That maybe this has got nothing to do with other countries. It's really a phone-in which would have sounded very different, wouldn't it? About your parents have worked very hard. That's what you have to say if you send your children to private school. You have to pretend the only people that work hard in this country are people who send their children to fee-paying schools. So that if, for example, the government puts VAT on it, you have to say, I work very hard, as if people who can't afford to send their children to private school are just dossing around all day. So I work very hard, you have to say, to send my children to public school. And the ungrateful little scrote is crying himself to sleep every night and refuses to pay attention. He wants to come home. And I've said, no, Tarquin, or indeed James, you will stay there until you're 18, until you're jolly well 18. I mean, and how fair would that be? The kid hates it. Dad's spending 30, 40 grand a year on a British public school, and the girl hates it. I think it's unnatural to be torn from the bosom of your loving family, albeit that your dad doesn't sound very loving. Your mum's an absolute doozy, and you hate it. And so what if it's got the best A-level results in the Western world? So what if it's got this and that? So what if it's got its own golf course and a pack of beagle hounds? I hate it. I want to come home. They say you can't. What would you do then? Would your answer be the same if I remove Ghana and Nigeria and other countries from the equation? And sending a child away who doesn't want to go, and you claim you're doing it for their best interests, whether it's their academic future or getting them out of a criminal context. A child hates what is happening to them on a daily basis, on a nightly basis, absolutely hates it. And you're going all Victorian. And saying, well, unlucky. It's character forming. You'll jolly well stay. I don't. You see, is it the same? I don't know. It's 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
48 is the time. Chris raises a valid point. She says, at least going to Toff School has provided you with lots of stories, James. That's very true. Well, no, probably only 3 stories, isn't it? I got beaten. I got expelled. Is there another one? Oh, yeah, and that geography teacher, he kept saying, what was it like? And then the geography teacher, he said, don't need to know, nobody knows. It's not on the... It's 12:48, it's like golden penguins. What are you talking about? Oh, stolen penguins, yes. Have I told that story on air? Oh, gosh, you are lucky. Back to the question of whether or not a 14-year-old boy should be sent away, essentially trafficked and imprisoned by his own parents because they are... concerned about his associations with potential criminality back at home. And originally the conversation was about Ghana, because that is the case under discussion, but it occurred to me just 3 minutes ago that the same would apply to any boarding school with a relatively strict regime. And quite hard to get out of. I think, did you have to climb over a wall at my school, or was that just to avoid the bits where someone would see you? I can't remember. Kelly's in Streatham. Kelly, what have you got?
Hi, James. You've got to be thick-skinned to go through what I went through. So when I was 14, my dad sent me to Ghana, and it was the worst time of my life.
Oh, no.
When I got there...
Hang on, don't jump ahead. Don't run ahead. Why did he send you there? Were you in trouble? Were you...
Nothing compared to the kids in this day and age. My dad's an old-school Ghanaian guy, so he expects excellence. He expects A-star grades. He expects you not to answer back. His saying in the house is, you will see where power lies.
Good
That's
Lord.
my dad's saying.
Yes.
So he's old school Ghanaian man. So I wasn't anything compared to my sister, who was an A-star kind of like nerdy student. I was a bit more naughty. I would answer back. I would be rude to him, and it wasn't something that he found acceptable.
Okay.
So he said, try go to Ghana. I'll send you to an international school. If you don't like it, you could come back. And he completely lied. When I got there, they started showing me around. Like, in all honesty, I'm a 14-year-old girl who's used to nice clothes, my nice things in the UK. They're showing me around third world schools, like all the children have shaved their heads, there's no toilet.
What?
I was like, no, what is this? So I was staying with one of my aunties. She's also quite elderly,
right,
and she caught me smoking a cigarette. So she cussed me out and sent me to my dad's sister's, which is more of a middle, like a like more of a ghetto area.
Right.
So I lived there for a while. They were trying to force me to go to school. Then one time I had a big argument with my dad. I said, I'm not staying here.
Your dad was back in Britain by now.
Yeah.
So you're on the phone to your dad, and you're refusing to go to school. You're refusing to go to school.
Yep.
Okay.
He's not letting me speak to my mum or my sister. I said, I want to come home. He said, I'm not coming back. So I got one bag and I went and I just started walking in the middle of Ghana.
What?
One lady, this is crazy, but one lady told me that there's a rich woman who lives in a particular place. If I expose it, people will know who I am. I'm sure I'm going to get some calls because people know this story to tell me to write a book. I started living with a madame. She owns a lot of property, businesses in Ghana, and she kept me. She actually paid off the police commissioner so that I could stay with her. My auntie wasn't allowed to come and claim me.
Well,
My dad had to speak to her.
Does madame mean the same as it means here?
She had ladies of the night.
Yeah, she ran brothels.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
just
she
checking.
did,
I was
she
just
did.
checking because you sound so
She
casual.
did.
Okay.
She was running drugs. She was trafficking people.
Okay,
and
well,
people know this
don't give
woman.
it. No, yeah, all right. No identifying details, all right? Because it's me that gets sued,
Yeah,
not you.
nothing
No.
extreme. But
Okay.
Well,
I'm
it
now
is
worried
extreme.
about what she had in
But
mind for you.
I didn't. She was really nice to me at first.
yeah,
I
that's-
got to stay in one of her mansions, and everything was good. My dad made an agreement that I had to go to school, and she told me, you know what? Don't worry, I'll pay everyone off. Go to school, and you don't even have to do anything. You're just going to hit the grades. I was like, yeah, this is great.
Wow.
Eventually, when she got more comfortable with me, she like would force me to work in her like restaurants, and she would make me wear certain clothes. I was constantly perved upon by older men, and I was only 14. I had to work inside the bar.
Yeah.
So I could go in, like the details are actually quite deep.
Okay.
Eventually, to cut a long story short, I ended up acquiring a mobile. My sister was in university and she paid. Like, one thing I'd done is hold on to my passport because my dad was not letting me back. I even went to the British Embassy with the help of an angel who was really kind to me, and I would call her Auntie Nurse. And I went to the British Embassy. My dad had already got to the embassy saying things about me.
Wow.
Like,
but your sister got you home.
My sister basically used her student loan. She was a university student.
Bless her.
She used her student loan. When I got back to her university, she went to East London University. I called my dad and said, hello, can you come and pick me up? And he said, oh, hello, and mentioned my sister's name. And I went, no, it's Kelly. And he went, how did you get back here? And that was the opening conversation of me being back in England. But I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I was constantly perved upon.
What a horrible story.
I didn't really, I didn't really get much education, but I was very smart. If it was another young lady, that lady could have been raped, abused. I'm quite a strong girl.
We know how that story ends.
Yeah, and I held on to my passport for dear life. Do you know what I mean?
This is an incredible story. I don't know how much light it sheds on this. Well, I mean, carry on if you want, but I presume your relationship with your dad was damaged.
Yeah, but even with my mum, like, because even as a mum, like, I'm stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you are a bit traumatised by it, I suspect, by the whole thing.
Yes, I am.
Because it is not right. You were a child. I mean, when we're 14, we think we've got all the answers, and you obviously had some of the answers, and you were tougher than they gave you credit for. But you were still a little girl, Kelly.
Yeah. It was hard. Like, I think I really rate the woman I am.
Yeah,
because
good.
not many people would have survived that.
I think
not
you're right.
being able to speak to my mum for even a year
That's brutal.
was really hard. And if it wasn't for my sister, I wouldn't have got back here. And I'm a great mum, and I'm a great woman. So,
of course you are.
you know,
Are you still tight with your sister?
I would never do that to my daughter. Like, my daughter's now in university studying law, and I would never, I couldn't imagine sending her to another country and not speaking to her for years.
Oh,
so it's really hard. Yeah, but it wasn't great, and I don't think that it's right that anyone should do that. It is trafficking. It is abuse.
That's incredible that you've managed to just not only share an extraordinary...
To be honest, I'm getting emotional.
I know you are. That's fine.
I laugh about it with my friends because I was literally so strong, and I got myself out of there like a real G.
You're allowed to be both. You're allowed to be both. You're allowed to be a real G, but you're also allowed to put your arms around 14-year-old Kelly and give her a cuddle and tell her that she's safe now. Tell her that she's all right. No one's
but
a
lot of people do tell me to write a book because there's so much more to the story, James, but I would be talking to you for hours.
Well, you should write a book.
You know?
Seriously, that's an incredible story. I'd read it. I'm absolutely intrigued to know what else went on. And I mean, it is a tale of triumph.
But it has, with the trauma as well, I've become more of a when anything happens at school, when it happens with my children, because that's where I got in most trouble. Just little things, or sometimes I would feel like they're blaming me, and my parents don't stick up for me. So anything that happens at my kids' school, they see me come in, they're like, "Oh my God, not this woman," because I'm not accepting it. I know the kind of children I've raised.
You're breaking the cycle, aren't you? You're protecting.
100%. I'm not going to let anyone take advantage, and I'm their biggest cheerleader, which is really important.
It's amazing that, because we talked a bit this hour about the shift in power and responsibility from parents to children, and one caller suggesting that children have too much. But if you're protecting children from exploitative adults, how can you ever argue that the children...
I do agree, though. Children in this day and age do have too much power. Like, there are some children making teachers cry, swearing to teachers.
Well. No, that's true as well.
But at the same time, we're not going to discard them, put them in a country, in a random country with no one to love or care for them, and anything could happen to them. Like, in that 2-year period, I always say to my mum, if we have an argument, I say, I'm telling you, Mum, if I had been raped or someone had done something to me, I would never speak to you again. It's only lucky that you sent the strong daughter. You sent the one that could cope, and did get through it. Anything could have happened to me. And
what does your mum say? What does your mum say?
My mum only apologises when we have arguments. My dad's never apologised because he's a very headstrong. Anyone who's Ghanaian will know an old school African father or uncle. They're very stubborn. It's very difficult for them to give you a hug or say sorry.
It's Victorian, actually. I mean, 19th century Victorian, 21st century Ghanaian, by the sounds of it, with an awful lot of crossover. Kelly, thank you for sharing that story.
So hopefully he's listening. He will know it's him.
It's not going to be a bit of a coincidence if there were two people who've been through what you've just described, but also props to your sister, because that is that's top sister. Do you know, I think we did a comedy phone-in once on the maddest things you've done with your student loan, and I thought it was funny that someone had bought British Gas shares with it, turned a tidy profit, and then cashed it in a few years later. How did you spend your student loan? I got my sister back from Ghana where she was being exploited by a brothel owner. Okay, yeah, I mean, we can all thank who brought in student loans. I bet they weren't expecting that one to appear on the positives list. What a show, as ever. If you missed any of it, you can listen back on Global Player or the new LBC app. They're both free. They both let you stay up to date with the top stories and opinions, put your news categories in the order you want, and even pause and rewind live radio. Wow. And podcasts, full disclosure. James O'Brien Daily, all the rest of them. Download it for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.